Okay. Welcome and happy holidays to a regular HARC. The HARC meeting of December 13th, 5:30 p.m. Rebecca Hall. This meeting will be held as a hybrid meeting. If you want to dial in by phone, you can use 301-715-592 and meeting ID number is 873-8211-581. Tonight's passcode is 943965. Before we call to order, just remind everybody of the purpose of HARC is preserve, maintain, and enhance the historic character, scale, architectural integrity, and cultural resources of the town, historic landmark district. We'll have the roll call here. First of all, recognize town council, people attending, our new liaison, Ilana Levin. Welcome.
Thank you.
And this is our first and only holiday meeting of the year. So, and we also, Scott was on, but I don't see, but staff, Jonna Piper and Allie are here. And board, let's take the roll call.
Kieran Landon,
Stacy Lake,
Matt Lee,
Mark Shamba.
Bob Mather,
Andrew Williamson.
Pizza, Will Benova.
Welcome all. Thank you. Our last meeting of the year. Hey. Okay, we made it. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes of our November 15th meeting?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Matt will second.
Kieran.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes. Do we have a motion for the chair meeting by me of November 17th? Yes, I was there. I read the meeting minutes. They reflect what happened and they are approved. Special HARC meeting, our design guidelines, rework for those that don't know what we're doing. We're within 4 chapters of the finish line of the whole book. That was on November 13th. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve those minutes.
That's right.
Matt will second. Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Okay, and do we have a motion for our special guideline meeting of December 6th?
I'll do that one too. I move to approve the special HARC meeting minutes as written for December 6th, 2023.
Second, anybody?
Matt will second.
Okay, Kieran.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
Okay, very good. And we will turn over to Jonna, who is doing a yeoman's job by being with us on Zoom, even though she's got COVID. And sorry you don't feel well, but welcome to the big screen. I've never seen you on the big screen before. It's always live. You look great.
Roles are reversed this time. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's forbearance tonight. It's been 7 years and I haven't missed a HARC meeting yet. So try to keep up my perfect attendance. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First, I'll just announce that it's time to start thinking about the Saving Places Conference. Again, it'll be held January 31st to February 2nd in Boulder. If you're interested in going, the town has budgeted some funding for HARC members to attend. Especially if you've never been, it is a great way to network and learn what other communities are doing. So let me know if you're interested. And the other item is the 2024 HARC meeting calendar. I put at the end of the agenda. We could do it then, or we could have you approve it now, whatever your pleasure is.
Let's do it now. Everybody had a
Okay.
chance to read it, the last 2 meetings?
I
Hey.
can put it up on the screen if that's helpful.
Everybody shook their heads. They've read it.
Okay.
Again,
There were a couple changes. April 17th is actually the second week of spring break, but that was okay with everyone. And then June 12th, we have a week early in the month because of the Juneteenth holiday on June 19th. Otherwise, it's exactly as we discussed last month.
Everybody good?
Yep.
So let's take a motion to approve
All right, I move to approve the 2024 HARC meeting schedule.
I second it.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark, yes.
Bob, yes.
It's unanimous. We're gonna be back.
Great,
Thank
thank you. And Mark, I have the public hearing process slide up and ready if you're ready to go over that.
Okay, well, I took my first straw poll the evening, John, before we turn you on the big screen. And if you're feeling better Monday, we may try to have a little Christmas cheer by 5:30 at the Sheridan TBD.
Okay,
If you're feeling
I'll
better,
shoot for that.
that's real incentive to get well.
It is, thank you.
Okay, so remind everybody of the process of the steps that we use for meetings. The chair will introduce the project, staff will give the presentation, answer our questions. The applicant then gives their presentation. We ask it to be 30 minutes or less.
30
The
seconds.
public-
3
Did I
minutes.
say 30 seconds?
You said 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
The public we've never had a 30-second one. The public will be invited to make any comments. We ask the public to please keep their comments under 3 minutes. And don't be duplicitous. Just say you agree if there's previous people who emphasize the same point. Electronically raise your comment. Then the applicant may address and have a rebuttal to the public comments. Public comment ends, the applicant will finish the rebuttal if there are more. And then HARC members will deliberate and then vote on the application. So thank you for following that. Just a reminder, raise your hand electronically out in the public if you're with us by Zoom. Otherwise, we'll call on you and come up to the podium and read your name so we know who it is speaking. If you're on the phone, dial *9 to make a comment. And I think with that, we'll get started with with the work session, followed by the public hearing items. The work session tonight, first item is the Canyonlands Northwest Building. Work session summary is a consideration of the application for work session for new construction pursuant to Land Use Code 5201C. Legal description is Lot 3, Block 1, Canyonlands subdivision of the town of Telluride, according to the plat book 1, page 168. Address to be TBD, West Colorado. It's in accommodations 2, zone district, applicant North Design, owner town of Telluride, and staff member Jana Wenzel. Jana?
Thank you, Mark. Before I start, I'd like to remind everyone that we received public comment from John Roth, Sherry Harvey, and Deanna Baggy. Has everyone had a chance to review those comments?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay, I'll also remind you that HARC held a work session in October on both the Tower House and Canyonlands project jointly. The applicants have redesigned the Canyonlands Northwest building, and they're here to discuss that one with you at the second work session tonight. I know you're all familiar, but for everyone else, the site is located on the south side of Colorado Avenue, adjacent to Clark's Market. It's in the Accommodations 2 zone district and the Accommodations treatment area. The Canyonlands site is vacant and is currently used for parking, storage, and staging. The proposal is to build 2 new affordable housing structures on this site. Here's the streetscape. This building has, as I mentioned, been redesigned since the October work session. But the location is the same. There's the large Canyonlands Northwest building, and to its east is the Canyonlands East building, which we'll talk about in the next agenda item. So this building that we're discussing in the work session is at the northwest corner of the lot, with parking below and behind the building. As is true for all of the Canyonlands and Tower House projects under review tonight, this project will be subject to the Canyonlands and Tower House Affordable Housing PUD and subdivision. That PUD is still under review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, so items such as site coverage, building height, and parking are undetermined right now. That may be determined tomorrow night at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but this evening, they're still unapproved. So at this work session, the applicants are looking for feedback on the redesign of this northwest building and its compliance with the design guidelines. As always, the work session does not vest the applicant or public with any specific outcome of the formal development review application. I believe that Kate Berg and Lindsay Newman are there with Norris Design, and John Lee with Designs of Tomorrow Architecture are there to represent the applicant team. Can I answer any questions for you at this point?
No questions for Jonna?
I have one, well, I have one, and it could be for the applicant as well. John, the requested reduction in the Colorado Avenue right of way. It may have been mentioned in one of the other items. Is that roughly a 50% reduction? A 50% reduction in the overall reduction, I guess the reduction of the reduction.
Right, I'm gonna have the applicant speak to that. Again, that's part of the subdivision application and recommendation to town council, so I am not sure where they stand on that right now.
I'll ask again.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
well. Let's hear from the applicant. If you'd like to share your screen and we'll get started. Welcome.
Hey, good evening. I'm Lindsay Newman with Norris Design, and we are planners, landscape architects, and placemakers, and we are joined tonight with John Lee from Dot Architecture and Mally from Dot Architecture as well. Kate Berg is on the phone. We also have Garrett Sharton, who's the developer with Servitas, with us virtually. So, you want to go to the next slide there, John? Thanks. So as Jonna mentioned, we saw you back in October virtually, and we have summarized the bullet points of what we heard back at that meeting, reducing the right-of-way encroachment, increasing open space and landscaping, reducing the overall mass and scale of all of the buildings, adding articulation and variation in setbacks, stepping down the building mass towards Colorado Avenue, providing pedestrian scale at the property lines and along private roads, and breaking up ridge lines and orienting primary gables perpendicular to the street to follow the historic design guidelines. So now we are looking at the proposed updated site plan. And to answer the previous question, the right-of-way request to vacate has been reduced by approximately 50%. So the Canyonlands Northwest building, and we'll get to the Canyonlands East building next. So I'll try to keep it just to the Canyonlands Northwest building in this discussion, but that building has been shifted back approximately 8.8 feet on the western corner and 2.5 feet on the eastern corner. So, no, too fast.
Susan.
So the goal with this change was to also keep the buildings in a similar scale and appearance with surrounding buildings. The Clark's Market is our neighbor, and they have a mansard roof. It's about 36.5 feet tall, which I think we covered in our last meeting, with a tower that's about 53 feet in height. Our proposed height is a maximum of 40 feet on the Canyonlands Northwest building. The East building will actually be remaining at 35 feet or less, so we're not asking for an increase in height on that building. We're also asking for an increase in height. It's about 17% of the total lot area. So it's not across the entire building. And of course, we'll have more detail on that as we move through the process. We also compared the footprint size of the two different sites, Clark's and our building here. And our footprint is just about 3,000 square feet smaller than the Clark's Market store. We also are thinking a lot as an overall site, how we can reduce the scale as you head east into town. So we have the Northwest building, which is our larger building, and then Canyonlands East, which is, as I mentioned, a 2-story building. So decreasing the height and scale as we move east towards town, and also adding vertical and horizontal stepping to create a townhome feeling on the Canyonlands Northwest building, and then a single family type feeling on the Canyonlands East building. So we'll show you in the elevations how we've created different modules to give that appearance rather than a single mass. Actually, I wanted to hit on one other thing, sorry. We have the open space shown in green here, and we will have in the rear of the building a seat wall area, and we might, or add some benches and just have a passive seating space. And then at the front of the building, we have reduced the scale as well on the building to create more articulation towards the sidewalk. And this will create a pedestrian scale with front porches and balconies. And we have the open space at the front in progress, designed to be both passive with seasonal color enhancements, textures, and then active as well with sidewalks for connectivity. We have the planters designed to frame those first floor porches and provide space for xeric perennials, ornamental grasses, and landscape garden space that will separate that public sidewalk from the porches. And there's a variation of about 10 to 20 feet for landscape space there. Okay, now I'm ready.
Good,
Yeah.
okay. And now I can jump in and talk a little bit more about the architecture. So Lindsay's did a great job of covering the right of way and the landscaping. So I'm gonna look at the mass and scale. So this was the original design. The street facing is the top left image. And a lot of the feedback was about the massing, the balcony being a little bit monotonous, the roof directions and things like that. And so we'll kind of talk through that in the next slide. And then the roof pitch, we actually increased several of the roofs to a 12-12 pitch from the 8-12 originally, which we think adds a lot of character to the building overall. And so you can see the new design here, where each mass gets, and again, this is the street facing the north elevation on the top left. And what we did is we broke it up vertically, and then we also broke it up horizontally. So we created 1, 2, and 3-story elements. We introduced different balcony types and different coverings for balconies to help break up the monotony of that. And even rotated a balcony to the other side of the building and rotated the roof to match. So we really took your feedback to heart and wanted to kind of respond to that. And you can see it here in 3D. I think one of the things that gets lost in the elevations is how much we are stepping the building back away from the property line to kind of create these different masses vertically. And like I say, we wanted to break up the building and make it feel more like, 3 to 4 townhomes instead of it being a multifamily project. And we really wanted to create that streetscape where it feels like when you come home, there's these front porches and this pedestrian scale to each building. And so each building feels a little bit unique. So that's our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Yes, we'll open up for questions. Just quick.
I think first, would you mind, since you have the 3D up, would you just sort of spin around the project for our benefit?
Sure.
Get a better sense of
So
the
this
mass
is,
and scale.
yeah. So we did actually end up modeling quite a bit of the other developments so that we could really get a feel for that mass and scale of our building. And we do feel like it kind of fills in some of those missing teeth on the street. And then as we go down the driveway here, this building feels a lot more like a single family home, and we'll talk about that in the next session.
Is any of the concrete here heated, snow melt?
Not currently.
Okay.
So, and then as we come around back, you guys are familiar with this view. And these were the kind of the seating walls and garden space. This isn't fully designed yet, but these are going to be some like seating areas people can come out. And then they have, each unit has its own balcony to help provide that outdoor space and relief. But yeah, so that's kind of the walker.
Can you do me a favor? Can you go back to the parking lot and look southwest? Southeast, sorry. Is there, and what I'm getting at with this, is there any egress for pedestrian traffic off the
Sure, yeah.
that part of the
Lodge,
yeah.
Yeah, let me go back down here. So we do have an exit on this side of the building and a sidewalk that takes you up. And that's the exit door there. And so you can walk completely around the building really in 3 places. So that's one place. Next to the driveway, we have an additional sidewalk
The
here.
question is there connection to Telluride Lodge?
And then we have
area.
one more over here.
To answer that question.
From the
uh,
back.
We're making
From the back?
connections to our rear property line, however, there is no current pedestrian access easement on the back. It's a private property,
Right.
so we're setting it up so that it could connect through, should the adjacent property owner wish to create that connection.
Yeah, so what we did here is we have kind of this landscaped path that cuts through our property. But this space here is kind of up in the air because we don't own that and the city doesn't own that. So this would be a question for the neighboring property if they would be okay adding that landscape path. So, but yeah, we do have that.
Just roughly, what's the setback on the east and west sides beyond the center prominent gable? Feet back, does that mean
This here, or are you talking about from the street?
from the center? Actually, that's equal with the center piece, isn't it? The two-story elements, right? The blue.
The blue?
It projects out. Crowd is equal to the centerpiece.
It's a little bit, it's probably the
Oh, I
most
see.
proud. It's close to the porch. The porch on this one comes out a little further,
Okay.
but yeah, it's pretty close. I can get those numbers. Do you remember the number of that?
I mean, I saw that it was set back, but I didn't, it looks like.
So the westernmost is set back 8.8 feet.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the easternmost is 2.5, so middle is approximately 5 feet.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Did any of these buildings have storage units?
All of them.
They all have storage
Yeah,
units?
the whole ground floor. We park underneath, we tuck under in the back, but then once you go inside, there's a storage unit for each unit.
And is there any bicycle storage as well?
That would be part of that space would count towards the bike storage.
So these would be just private areas for storage, not specifically designated for
We-
parking your bike?
Essentially, we've separated them into individual storage units, and so you can put whatever you like in there, but it'll be big enough for bicycles and other types of storage items. So, we just wanted to create a safe place to store everything under the building. So each one would be lockable.
You had mentioned that, you had broken up the front facade or the north facade, horizontally as well as vertically. Which elements, if you just point them out, do you feel breaks up the massing vertically?
Vertically, well, it's essentially creating these two blue masses and then fronting that with the porch. Those create more of a hierarchy in the building design, which kind of draw your eye to the center of the building. And then each one of these buildings kind of standing on their own, almost like an individual separate structure. That's really what vertically separates it. And then we've pulled this out and created a covered entryway. So this feels more like a one-story element, and the roof wraps to kind of accentuate that. And then on this side, we have the two-story element with the separate two porches that also kind of help break down that scale. So it's a two-story, but then you have that kind of half story with the porch.
The questions. Again, I commend you for coming back for a work session, because so we can be more informed.
Can you go back to the back parking lot and kind of show some of the snow storage space that you have? That's one concern that I have on this, is how difficult it's going to be to get a truck in there to push it around, especially if you exceed the amount that this can hold. Because they're either going to have to put it into a dump truck, or they're going to have to push it out towards Main Street, which also means that everyone that's there is going to have to go find parking somewhere else, which, as you already know, is very difficult in this town.
Yeah. Well, right now the snow storage, and Lindsay can kind of talk a little bit more about this, but essentially is at the back of the site. And that is something we're still working out with some of the site retaining and other elements. We'll probably come down lower so that we can create a little bit more snow storage in the back. The good thing is a lot of our parking is covered. We have the covered spaces here and here. And so really the snow is really just this drive aisle and then the main driveway.
And whatever the wind blows in.
And then whatever the wind blows in. But yeah, we're trying to keep it protected as much as we can.
Yeah, we've been discussing covered parking as a solution because we understand that the snow storage is going to be challenging on this site, so we're still working through some of those details.
And did you guys ever, when, from our last work session, when we talked about, how much it would really help overall project, for a garage, and we know that's expensive, but did you ever reach out to Clark's, just thinking about the future that they're probably going to expand one day and they'll need additional parking as well, maybe try to go in that together financially?
We haven't visited that specifically. What we've really tried to look at is, how much of it can we cover and at a reasonable, cost, as well as, we have some restrictions. Once your ramp gets to a certain length, getting into a subterranean garage on this site would be very, very tricky. And so a lot of things like that we have studied, and this was the best solution that we've landed on for the parking to work.
It's also a challenge because we have the one access point, and as John mentioned, the grades are fixed with Colorado Avenue, so dealing with that and a higher water table and things like that do make it a challenge.
I think it's a vast improvement over the last design.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing the 3D renderings.
That helps a lot.
Matt and several of us wanted to see, as we get from most applicants. I concur, with change in articulation, the right-of-way setback, there's breaking up the modules a little more, several improvements. The ridge length is still how long?
We brought all those under 60, so there aren't any, we're not asking for anything with that. The worst one is, I think, 59 feet. So we're close, but yeah.
Okay,
Is that the run running?
So that's Canyon,
North-south?
that's Canyon Lands East, so that's the other building, that's not on this building.
Yeah.
Well, it is this middle, it's this middle gable. The other ones are all shorter. We just wanted to, the main reason it ended up that way was so that we could have the porch, because it becomes the porch roof. And if we shortened it up, the drainage gets a little tricky in the back. So that's the main reason why it's there. You won't really notice it because there'll be crickets that hide the majority of it. And from the angle, you won't really see that length.
the articulation was created, still the 6E, the pedestrian scale stepping down to the street and alley, which porches alone don't do it. They have to change in wall plane. And then 20, again, just trying to help you. And then 20, well, that's 6E. It's also 23,
23.
number H or I2, step down the mass of the larger buildings, the perceived scale of the street. Again, I would like to hear from other members, but that standing proud 3 stories straight up with just differentiated by a deck is not compliant with the guidelines, but I think that's, well, something I'd just like to hear everybody comment on. And at the end, we'll summarize and give you clear feedback like we tried to do last time, and I can see you've clicked off a lot of things, so thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback. I think it's a better project from it, so.
Would you mind kind of zooming out and get a kind of a bird's eye?
Sure.
Sort of shows what you've got kind of modeled in context.
Yeah. And just for clarity, that's storage for
Sure.
mechanical, so that's why it's there, but. So, yeah.
Is there a way for you to quickly kind of get it out of the orthographic instead of perspective? I'm trying to not make Clark's be so overwhelming there.
Just zoom in, you mean?
Well, I don't know with your program, if it seems to be a perspective, if there's a way to make it not in the perspective.
Not in this program,
Okay,
unfortunately.
Well, I think that's fine there. If you want to kind of hold it, maybe
Okay.
we can kind of take a look.
One thing if you're done, one thing I think would help on the center, the white building, is since that element is all the porch, if I'm not correct.
It is, it's correct.
That roof, if that were stepped down in front of the roof for the building, kind of like what you did on the blue building to the right. I think that would help break up that mass in the center quite a bit
I think
and bring it down.
the tricky thing is the sort of the blue mass, that's a single wall plan, which is an addition. So I actually had a hard time from the drawings to tell, I didn't realize the porch was there. I think it's
same.
I think it helps the project dramatically to have that. But I would agree with Bob if there's some way to bring the scale of that roof down. And I know that's gonna complicate your roof forms there, but that would help tremendously. I'll just kind of jump in. I think this is a much better project than you had last time. I really appreciate the 3D work. I hope that you present that in your applications going forward, because it really gives us a chance to sort of absorb it and think about it. So we're more productive with you guys in these meetings. I really appreciate moving the northwest corner down to 2 stories. That's feeling a lot better to me. I personally don't mind if this project gets taller sort of in the middle. I think I would like to see something similar done to the northeast corner there. I know you've got a bit of a wall plane change where you have the deck, but still we're looking at a 3+ story wall plane there, and then it backs into 3 stories in the back. I think I like the direction you're heading. I think overall what I still have an issue with, and I think Mark is saying as well, is that this is still all these projects are very large. We're looking at 3 and sometimes 4 stories, unbroken wall planes. And you're starting to move in the right direction with articulating that and breaking down the scale to these corners and edges. And I would encourage you to continue to do that. The backside where you have the parking, while it is not as prominent as Main Street, you do have neighbors that are going to be looking at that, and that looks to be a 160 feet of unbroken wall plane. So those are the major pieces that my feedback. And then I guess there's also the question, if the setback to the street is enough. I appreciate you guys moving it farther back. I personally would like to see more larger mature trees and landscaping. The hotel kind of across the street does a good job of hiding its mass scale, which it's 3 stories and approaching 4 with roofs in some places there. And it's mostly hidden from the pedestrian driving or walking by.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, as I reviewed the project, I really got stuck on 6E1, AC 6E1, step down in scale along the street or alley. It does go on to say by using decks, porches, bays, and balconies, but I think it's important to note how those elements could or should be or could be used to step down the scale. I think the center form, I don't think it, for me, doesn't achieve that. It's a novel way to cover those porches and to make them super functional on the north side like that. But again, the perception that what that really does is all those decks now are perceived as mass. Especially when you look at them in an elevation, right? It's hard to I didn't even understand until we got into this 3D view that was how they were being treated. As it's open on both sides and it's just the wall, the wall plane. But it's hard for me to look at that and conscientiously say that there's any stepping down happening there.
Right.
I do appreciate it on the northwest corner. I appreciate the roof form, which begins to speak to a 1-story form with a 2-story form immediately, on top of it. But at least there's a gesture there. But that center form for me doesn't get there. I really want to see each of those 2 levels be pushed back. Now I know I'm taking square footage from someone who's going to have to live there. I'm reducing the size of their deck, but I'm responding to guidelines that have been handed to me when I was appointed to this job. Anyway, the other things that what are the other notes? 16C, maintain a pattern of alignment similar to the treatment area. It was hard for me to tell that from the drawings. There was no contextual plan. I think, especially, it's easy enough to compare it to your own context of Tower House and But, you know, I'd maybe like to see that zoomed out a little more.
We did add a few more buildings, neighboring buildings down here, but, yeah,
Yeah, but
It's
it
all
didn't
good
make it
detail.
into a plan that was in our packet,
okay.
as far as I saw. No, I understand. I'm going forward.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see, right? I did spend a lot of time contemplating 23A1, the western edge of town. Is this or isn't this the western edge of town? Sure. I mean, it is the western edge of town, but is it really the western edge of town? Where is the western edge of town? I started having a circular conversation with myself, which I want to do. But that particular section does speak to buildings being of a similar scale with town. And it doesn't say with accommodations, it says with town. Maybe that's really broad. Again, I think for me, that's a bit of a stretch. At the west, if this is considered the western edge of town, and maybe we should get on the same page if it is or isn't. It's near the western edge.
It's in the gateway area. Yeah.
Is this similar to the scale in town? That's a question. It's not and unfortunately, there's not a yes or no answer, I don't think. The other thing, let's see, there's two more. I did key in on Jonna's comment that the area between buildings should contribute to open space. And we really, it's access. Now, I would personally be willing to sort of trade the fact that the parking is located at the rear for that positive open space with regards to that, with that guideline. 23H is a tough one, boy. Mass and scale similar to historic structures. Rough, but as we talked about, we don't have to comply with every single guideline, just the overall intent, right? I did write down the positives. I think that northwest corner move is great. The increase 8 foot, 8.5, well, it's 8.8 foot increase setback's great. And the fact that you're not really asking for a height increase above the, you know, as a part of the PUD is great. There you go.
I'd say that I would agree with everything that Stacy said. I've been kind of keying on the introduction and the number 4 that talks about the Colorado Avenue corridor and just whether or not this is enough breathing room between the street and these 3-story with roofs, 4-story elements, and if there's enough landscaping in between. I'd like to kind of hear what the board says. I'd still prefer if some of these buildings could shift back farther to allow for more mature landscaping. Just to note, most of this landscaping here is not on your property. It's on the town's property, right? So you're not actually landscaping a lot on these actual property boundaries. So I think that should be recognized.
I would agree with that as well.
How deep are those porches on the white building? White part of the building?
They're about 5 feet currently.
So stepping them back would require stepping back the building itself behind it in order to do that.
The envelope behind it, yeah.
I think that the step that we talked about, and Matt and I talked about lowering that roof over the decks will certainly help a lot. I don't know, maybe try to see if you could push the second or third floor back a little bit and see if that can get a little more articulation there, and then do the roof.
Second and third or just third?
Well, at least the third.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least the third floor, push that back a bit, lower the roof over the decks. I think I really kind of like the way that works. But lower that roof and see if that can work.
Yeah, I think we can articulate this. The main reason this is here is that blue mass, if you were to remove it, just gets super long. And so this was a way to break it up and make it functional.
I like the
I think it's
idea of
being
that,
successful, yeah.
that element, and then the blue walls back a ways really does help step everything back a lot. And it's step back from the dark blue portion as well.
Right, so if that white gable element turned to a shed roof above it, that would lower the mass.
Or even a gable, but just,
lower.
I don't know, it's a deck, you don't need to be that tall. We can do that over it.
Well, it continues over the enclosed space beyond.
They would have to think, it's, they'd have to be thinking some of the roof forms, but I agree with the sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at a different roof form, whatever to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to beat a dead horse, but just in terms of pedestrian scale, that middle form struggles the most.
Would it help to add a horizontal element to that that center piece? Would that help break it up? Maybe at the ground level, this area here, maybe it's changing that design a little bit more.
Yeah, something to articulate that plane. It, especially, you know, right now we're looking at it dead on, but if we were traveling west on Colorado Avenue, you know, that's a three-story corner.
This direction.
It's a series of three-story corners, right?
I mean, that.
Well, we did just do the facade to help it disappear. When you're looking at it from this angle, it really only shows up fully in the front elevation. Cause this side, it just looks like a balcony.
And it does, and I agree with you. I think it's successful, except for it, there's no stepping back there.
Right.
Like none.
We can add that.
The wall planes here that we're seeing that are sort of the blue and the pink color, are those continue, no, so, back towards your,
Back here.
yep, are those the same plane?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
We could look at
So I
articulating
would,
that a little
Yeah.
bit.
yeah, and I think articulating those would help, and to me, you know, 6 inches doesn't really do it, it needs to be a significant step.
Yeah, on the ground floor, we did do that, but I think maybe if we cantilever the upper level a little bit more, maybe that could be a way to get there.
Yeah.
And it might cover the sidewalk.
That might be good.
Not gonna complain about it.
I did have one other item. 21 service areas. It seems like that trash enclosure is maybe could be thought through a little better.
It's a work in progress. Yeah.
Could you go back to the front elevation and the 17% that might be proposed at 40 feet to get a variance? It's really the center door and then just behind it, brown front and back of the blue, right?
Yeah, it's,
Is that only 17%?
well, it's the 17% of the overall site,
Yeah, okay, just the square footage of
just the square footage of the overall site. Correct.
Sky.
And then this building is completely under 35 feet, so. Yeah. But yeah, it is the middle and side roof forms that add to that.
Before we summarize, to help you with even sharper feedback, I'm gonna do a couple straw polls.
Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
and that way you won't think, oh, there's only one person speaking to this. Don't know what the answer is yet. Okay. Oh, well, let me say one other thing. Since we're in a work session and we can have more casual conversation, which is great, and work means to me, work together.
Yeah.
To solve this and get it compliant, and that's what we want to help you do. When we get into the public hearing, I won't bring this up again. But one person brought it up, I heard it brought up at T and Z, which, are you going there tomorrow night?
Yes.
So, you know, I actually just did a similar square foot on raft foundations, you know, and with the water, it was very shallow. And of course, you need to weigh those options, but that underground garage solves 4 problems at once, and then you gotta do the pro forma against the number of units. Number one, it creates more parking. Number two, more open spaces, and this whole mass and scale that we're talking about moving back further can more easily be accomplished without sacrificing what I see as 2 to 3 units. Or I don't think that you're gonna go smaller square footage, but I'm just asking one last time for you to consider that as a design solution, since it's about $550,000 current pricing, by the way, that I just got on a similar square footage. But then you have the pro forma on 3 more units and et cetera, et cetera. So since it's been brought up several times in 2 different boards, I just like you to
So
final consider
we
that.
did study that, and I'd love to have a conversation about it. We did study that, and the issue we run into, it's not the height that's the issue, or the water table. It's the length of the ramp, because to hit the
Get
center,
out.
the drive aisle, if we make the ramp any longer to go deeper, we don't have a parking lot because we're gonna cross the parking lot with
Okay.
the ramp. So
Thank-
that's been our issue with it.
Makes us feel better that you're looking
We
under
did
every
try,
rock.
but it didn't work out for us.
But I'll summarize with straw poll questions then. I have four major points I've been gathering. Unless anybody has something else individually to add.
I just want to add one more on 28 building components. D, the placement and size of decks and balconies should be similar to those found traditionally within the treatment areas. This is a very important corridor here, coming into the town of Telluride. And, we want to preserve and enhance. And, having that many balconies that close, just to me, doesn't feel like it's preserving, enhancing, or complementing the architecture that already exists here in the town. And, you want to be able to get everyone a balcony and to be able to get as many of these in here as possible. But as we said in the last one, when people are driving in, one of the first things they're going to see is this building and everybody's stuff hanging on the porch. And that's just not what we want to have here. And so I do commend you. I think it's a great improvement from what was done previously, but you guys are heading in the right direction, but I think that there's still some work left to be done.
Can I ask, one of the requirements is that each unit have a porch?
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, is that an exception you would make to not have porches if that's that big of a concern, just to work
Well, I mean,
that out?
that back wall plane doesn't have any on the back, does it?
Now that there's a porch for every
Or
unit.
one, but
Is that the town's guidelines
yeah.
for
It
affordable
is,
housing?
yeah, it's a requirement, so we would.
That's not our decision to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
Right, I'm just trying to negotiate it, understand how
Well,
you feel about it.
If we're here to work as a team, the answer is, I think it would improve it, at least on that north elevation.
Right,
Because
Okay.
that's not traditional, and we are bound by these guidelines that say mirror the traditional.
we can.
So
we
you might
can work
explore
on
that. That could be a major help.
Okay, that's good feedback.
For solid railing.
Yeah, that would also
that
help.
definitely helps.
Doing there in the middle, for sure.
So the 5 points now, thanks for the fifth, that I've written down are the back 160-foot wall plane, 3-story. Can you go around that corner
Sure.
with no articulation and no step down to the parking area? I mean, that looks like a Hampton Inn. Forgive me, but I mean, if I were to describe an architectural theme, and just adding those decks doesn't do it. It's got, the guidelines would not allow that. So we've cited the guidelines and on 6E1, 23 2 and 23A1. I think, Matt, you brought this up. Something needs to happen with a change in wall plane there.
I think it's a change in wall plane. I actually like the way you've got kind of two different decks, at least two different architectural languages. One's more open, one's more enclosed. So if you perhaps brought in part of what you were doing up front, portion of this back here, if you articulate the wall planes, if you both horizontally and vertically, to me, it's obviously not as important as the Main Street side, but it needs to be addressed. So we don't want to have the neighbors looking into this flat 160-foot wall.
Okay, so that's number one.
Yeah.
Straw poll, all agree with Matt?
I'm less, it's gotta give somewhere.
Okay, so, well, I don't know, the guidelines,
it's-
guidelines are the
The
guidelines.
guidelines
I
speak to
don't look-
streets and alleys, and this is neither.
Well, okay, so we got a majority that are pretty passionate about this.
Okay.
Two,
That's why it's a poll.
Huh?
That's why we're taking a poll.
and I like to do this so you know that it's clear direction, not some one-off. Two, step down to the east. And on the front, two areas we talked about on the east side, going down that walkway and adding some articulation there perhaps, or while stepping down. And on the front north, I think that's the most sensitive part I've gotten from everybody here, is that third floor has got to go back, even if you do a small gable roof form. It just the guidelines don't bend in that regard. There's gotta be a step back. You know, it could be one unit lost, I don't know, but if we could get through this, we could be one and done next time. So take these comments as seriously as given. So everybody, yep, compliant, yeah, okay.
Yes.
3, the right of way step back over 8, it is now 8 feet or went back 8 feet further? On that northwest corner, right
We
away?
moved it back.
Yeah, 8
about,
feet.
well, close to 9.
So, sometimes it's a combination of things, you know, if you, that went back a little further and then it wasn't as dramatic a step back on the 3rd floor, you know, maybe, but we need to see it probably for any, you included, to know what that impact would be. But I'm gonna ask, does everybody agree that further step back, setback on that northwest corner, another couple feet would help and allow them, as Matt said, mature landscaping?
Yep.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Well, no, it's not. I
Okay.
think they responded adequately to the feedback we gave them at the first work session.
Okay,
So I think a reduction of almost 9 feet is, I'm good with that.
So you feel like there's enough buffer between the buildings and the street?
For the goals, given the goals we're trying to achieve, yes.
okay, well, so 6 out of 7 believe there should be some further setback. Commend you for what you did. Number 4, articulate the wall plane, 3 to 5 on that whole east side with the blue and the pink buildings, which we've talked about as you walk along there. And that offset as well as the step down. I mean, some sort of step down, but also the offset. The offset, I think, was a great idea. I didn't think of that. So everybody concur with
Yes.
those elements? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's unanimous. And then the decks, which were just brought up, too many balconies, particularly on the north facade, and then maybe mixing them up on the south side could help.
Can we talk about that? I don't know if I agree. There's too many balconies there. I mean,
Okay.
I
Let's talk about
understand Drooper's concern and I feel like it's more prevalent on some of their other projects we'll see in a little while. If these were more solid railings, balconies, I appreciate what they're doing here with this piece of architecture, and I think it's helping the project. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, the guideline says the placement size of decks shall be similar to those found traditionally within the treatment areas. I don't know of a 4-pack together like that. I could.
Well, there were no buildings
Accommodations.
like this historically. or
Right.
traditionally, so.
But it's a different kind of building. It's within the treatment areas.
But within this treatment area, there's accommodations.
There are
and
some.
you've got big 3, 4-story, 3-story condo units, and I don't see it being that much different. I think if they do the things we've talked about, the articulation we're talking about.
Okay, if they do 1 through 4, everybody okay with the decks?
Well, 6E1 is, to be clear, step down in scale along the street by using decks, porches, bays, and balconies. Now, there are decks here, but do those decks contribute to a stepping down?
Not the way.
I
it is
don't
now.
think so.
Not on this,
not-
not in this center
We agree.
section.
Okay, that 6E1.
So what do we do? What are we saying about decks then? What's our clear message?
We need more
Well,
articulation.
the applicant here has found a novel solution which solves one problem and exacerbates another. I mean, that plane, it is a part of a deck system. It literal reading, well, they've added decks. Well, but that doesn't contribute to stepping down, not in this configuration.
Right.
Hey, I'm not even gonna talk about the decks at the 3rd floor step back reasonably.
So, I
think we're
mean,
in
maybe
agreement.
we're beating a dead horse here, but I want to see the third.
Long dead, man.
Okay, the 3rd floor there needs to be stepping back.
I think we all agree
Okay,
on that.
you heard it live and in person. Okay. Anything else I missed on the summary? Have we given them the right feedback?
What about landscaping, more mature trees? What do you guys feel about that?
Well, think that they're gonna need a little more room to your suggestion of moving back further to have that, but it certainly would help. And again, landscaping, more mature trees, I guess that's the question.
Well, Hotel Telluride's trees weren't mature when they were planted.
Yeah, they
I
look
mean,
great.
Yeah, and these will get there.
But I'm just saying there's not a lot.
Well,
here.
sure.
It's
And-
it's primarily what I'm saying.
Well, we're not gonna deal with the diameter trees at this meeting, so,
That, and that's one of John's conditions,
It
by the
is.
way, is to,
well, one of the key elements, they've heard us. One last time about the height, so that 40 feet is 10 foot above the commercial complex adjacent to it, correct?
To the very top, the
Yeah,
highest.
the top
peak-
of that
The
gable,
very highest peak.
because
of
it's
our
30
gable.
feet next door to the east.
Yeah, but if
Or
you,
west.
if you were actually to measure to the center line, we're actually, what, like 3 feet, 4 feet above? So it's not as dramatic as the peak.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take a straw poll. If in this design process, if the highest ridge could come down something below 40 feet or closer to, you did a great job on the projects we're coming up to on 35 feet. Would you believe that would be more compliant with the guidelines on context of neighborhood? I don't need to read all the guidelines, but that's a straw poll question.
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the 12 to 12 pitch. Maybe 10, 12 buys them a couple feet.
But then it looks wider.
I know, but they've broken it up into so many vertical pieces. It's about proportion.
Okay.
Right?
I think they got the pitch right. I think you did a good move there.
Just a note, what's the ridge height of the dark blue building there? The ridge height of it,
I'd have to get,
The blue, oh, the two-story blue?
the piece that's closest to Clark's.
Yeah.
Complex.
It's less than.
You read that?
Well, I measured the whole absolute ridge height down to the parking lot is 46 feet. But this piece is lower. It's that.
But the part that you see adjacent to
Yeah.
that complex is what?
let me get that for you.
But that's what you're gonna read.
Around 30 feet or so.
One sec, I'll tell you exactly.
All that complex of the high ridge gables are all.
We're right at 30 feet, for the overall height of that gable.
The median height.
So for the conversation, those 40-foot ridges, we'd like to see if those come down, which would significantly help mass and scale. And again, this is the gateway by definition within the zone. The gateway, we've almost beat it to death, but that's what everybody sees. They don't see Tyrad Lodge two blocks behind you. And so I really ask you to take that seriously and to comply, if you consider any other programmatic changes which happen to allow this to conform, I'd love to see this one and done. But done a little math, and I think there might be, you already adjusted the program once, there might be another program change, but all I can say is we'd love to see this compliant come back. And we appreciate the changes you did make. And unless there's something else, I think we've given you all the feedback we know how to give based on these guidelines. Thank you.
Or do you have any other questions for us?
I would ask about that height, because we have lowered the building, as much as we can to make the units livable. If we do lower those overall roofs anymore, it would lose an entire floor of units, and that's our concern. So is there a compromise where we lower this front deck and we kind of create that stepping and really lean into that? Is there a way to get somewhere meet in the middle on that?
Well, we're not supposed to compromise the guidelines, but I know what you're asking.
Well, we're under the 40 feet, and that
Yeah.
is one of the guidelines, is we can get to 40
Yeah.
feet, so.
I'm gonna throw out there that I think the criticalness that we've talked about of this third floor step back being significant.
Uh-huh.
Most places in town, we've got 8 to 10 foot. and right down on Main Street, we've got 25, 30, 32, 35, and 40 feet on the last 5 projects that we have sat with applicants on. And it's seared into my mind. We're not asking for 40 feet, but that's because like you say, that eliminates third floor, but I would think that would make a more difference than maybe even the height. You think, don't you think?
I would be fine with a taller elements in the middle if we're stepping down all the edges so that someone walking or driving by can't really read that roof that's in the back middle. But to me, that's fine.
I agree.
There you go. So it's the gateway. We got to get it right.
Right. Take the feedback and incorporate it.
Please. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Mark, do you want to take public comment if there is any?
Yeah, we won't close out here without it. And thank you, John, for finding us. Public comment can start anybody in the room, or you're electronically. Raise your hand. We have 3 letters. You guys read the 3 letters?
Public comment in the room should go to the microphone at the table.
State your name and 3 minutes or less, please. And
Okay,
welcome.
thank you. I'm Patty McIntosh and I'm on the board of Telluride Lodge. I came to the first meeting and was like blown away that it looks so uninteresting. So this is much better. Thank you, thank you. And so I have a couple suggestions, being the property right behind. If it's impossible to build an underground parking, you say now because of the ramp, could you dig out make basements that have egress windows to get, to lower the height of the building? Telluride Lodge, we do that all the time. So,
I'm gonna finish and then you'll have a chance to rebuttal.
and then, so you could have a basement that's really not a basement because you have big egress windows. So the height problem is, like, I agree with the board here that I think it's way too high. I like the blue building. Could you put the height in between the blue and the white building instead of going the white building so high? And then the backside of the building that faces Telluride Lodge, like you said, needs to be more interesting. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the room? Please come up, just read your name. Welcome.
Hello, Matt Hintermeister. I probably am the closest neighbor. I'm right there in the corner of the Clark's building. And essentially, I was here last time. I made similar comments. I think a lot of the HARC board's comments can be addressed by simply following the rules that I thought that this lot would follow, like lot line. The fact that the lot line goes from that corner wall there below my unit on a diagonal, not even straight across the Clark's building, but on a diagonal, made me believe when I bought my condo that I would maintain a view from my living room to the east, because it would have been impossible to block it if you followed the rules. And the only reason this particular applicant is even considering not following the rules is because someone at the town made them believe that that was okay. And the lot is plenty big enough to push this thing back onto the lot itself to preserve the public right of way, and hopefully get as many units of housing as possible. But the current iteration, while better than the first, simply doesn't go there. And I'm still a little baffled that some folks think that this is now okay regarding setback. I mean, it blows me away. It's actually the setback problem, even though they did push it back a little bit, reads on this 3D rendering far worse than I could have imagined. So thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? And Piper, I don't see anybody anybody else out there would like to raise their hand and comment? Before we wrap up here?
Mark, can I say one more thing?
Let me see if there's any other comments here. Normally everybody gets, but it's gonna be something different. Okay,
The balcony.
hang on just a second. Anybody else electronically want to raise their hand? Going once? Going twice?
Mark, I think Sherry would like to speak, but isn't able to raise her hand.
I will ask her to unmute.
Oh, okay.
Oh, great, thank you. Hi, can I make public comment now?
Yes, yep.
Great. I wanted to say a few things, and I excuse me if some of these comments are a little off because I didn't haven't followed this project from the onset. But I just wanted to throw out an idea, if it's possible at all, that access is not off of Main Street and from Telly Red Lodge behind it. And then possibly the ramp wouldn't be as steep, and then you could follow through with that raft foundation that Mark suggested. That was one idea that I had that I'd throw out there. The other one is I think that the guidelines are really supportive about increasing the setbacks on the third floor and even the second floor. I think it's really important, and the housing unit that's down on the next corner that you can even see in your model, you can see the example of how far back that's set and how it's compatible with Main Street. So I would hope that those setbacks could be increased. And also the overall height, as I put in my letter, there's no reason to have 9 and 10-foot ceilings. And I know HARC is not allowed to talk about the interior, but I would like, as a member of the public, to talk about the interiors of the affordable housing projects that I've visited. And I do not think that having 10-foot ceilings is necessary. There are rooms that are taller than they are wide that are literally fit single beds. And I also, so I think thinking about these spaces on the interior, maybe there just aren't as many units as they're hoping to squeeze in here if they need to have a deck for every single unit. So I would hope that the applicant will reduce the plate heights to something more compatible and less units. And definitely Mark's comment about the Hampton Inn on the back is spot on. I just wanted to support all those things that I heard tonight and add what I know from the guidelines that support stepping back the entire building, let alone the third story. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment, the applicant, if you'd like to comment back on a couple of the public comments. Wait a minute, excuse me. You had a comment on the
Yeah, on the
balconies?
balcony.
It's a little unusual, but since it's a work session, not a public
Okay.
hearing, we're gonna allow it.
Sorry, I didn't mention this before. If you said the balconies were like 5 feet, probably 5 by 7, 5 by 6, something like that. Maybe if you could do more Romeo and Juliet like balcony that you open the doors and you really enjoy that space from the inside instead of having furniture outside. That's just
Thank you. So you have the last word.
Sure. Yeah, those are all great comments, and a lot of those things we've studied through the course of the project. We originally did want units on that lower level so that we could play with the height more, but one of the issues is floodplain. Your livable units have to be 2 feet above the highest finish grade. So that's one of the reasons why we can't go lower with the living units. The setback comment is, we've studied that as well. We start pulling the building back further. There's a lot of parking issues that it creates. That's one thing, but the other thing, we were really trying to respond to some of the guidelines that talk about enforcing the grid of the town. And this really does bring these buildings to where the rest of the town sits when it comes to setbacks. And so that was one of our focuses, was to really reinforce that grid as one of the requirements. But yeah, I think that,
Okay.
I think the rest of the feedback that you guys all gave us really kind of accomplish a lot of the comments. And I think that we have a lot to chew on and a lot to bring back to you guys, so.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
All right, let me get my notes. Okay, our first public hearing item this evening is the Canyonlands, the portion of the building to the east, consideration of a small scale application for new construction Canyonlands East outside of the THLD will contain more than 2,000 square foot floor area, but not more than 5,000 square foot per land use code 720B2B1. Legal description, lot 3, block 1, Canyonlands subdivision. According to the plat book 1, page 168, it's an address at TBD, West Colorado, zone district accommodations 2 for town of Telluride. Applicant Norse Design, staff member Jonna Wenzel. Jonna.
Okay, thank you. This proposed structure occupies the same site as the one just discussed in the work session, but along the east side of the site. This is a small scale application because it contains less than 5,000 square feet. The work session that you just did, when we get the development application, will be a large scale application, which will require 2 hearings, a preliminary and final with story polls. So this one is small scale, typically 1 review required. But however, as I noted in the staff memo, staff is requesting that this application be continued to the January 17th HARC meeting or until after P&Z approves the conceptual PUD. This application for this east building on its own is compliant with the underlying zoning, but we know that when the larger northwest building is added, the site coverage and parking calculations will change. So staff recommends discussing the January 17th date certain with the applicants to make sure they're comfortable with that turnaround schedule. Again, this building that we're discussing right now is just to the east of the larger Northwest Canyonlands building still on the Canyonlands site. Again, a couple of these items need to be approved per the PUD, which is still in process. And in the memo, I've provided some proposed conditions, which HARC can discuss this evening and add any others that you find appropriate. The first one is to provide a landscape plan with species and quantities of plants. This came up in the work session actually to provide generous landscaping. Also, this came up, and I think John Lee mentioned during his presentation that they're still studying the parking plan. And we'd like to see each space clearly identified and the numbers of parking spaces on site and then where those associated parking spaces might be off site. The parking plan given in the packet obviously is not probably what they want to show as far as the parking area working and turning radius working. So we'll watch for revisions on that. Condition number 3 was to restudy the placement of the rear stairs. And when we initially saw this in the work session, the stairs were parallel with the building, and now they've been turned perpendicular, which appears to add to the mass and scale, and maybe not a nice amenity for the neighbors. Condition number 4 was to select a stone veneer that appears to be a native type stone. The stone in the materials sheet is not terribly specific, and maybe they would provide a sample or more specific type of stone that looks like it's from this region. Condition number 5 is to provide a cut sheet of proposed lighting fixtures that are consistent with the lighting standards. Condition number 6 is to provide a complete exterior lighting plan. And then 7 is final approval of this application is contingent upon approval of the Canyonlands and Tower House Affordable housing large-scale preliminary PUD and subdivision, which I mentioned, will be required to determine compliance. And I realized as I was sitting here, I mentioned another condition in the memo that didn't make it into the list, which you might consider as condition 8. And that would be maybe to discuss the height and materials of the retaining wall along the west side of this east building. So with that, same team on this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I have a question, John. Do we enforce the 2/3 light doors in the accommodations zone district?
It's not specific in the accommodations, but that is generally a policy that HARC enforces.
Thank you.
Jana, on the east elevation, and we'll go through this with the applicant. I didn't see it noted, but the amount of windows, which window wall ratio is the guideline and to mirror traditional and 1, 2. 14 different windows on that side. Did that catch your attention, or you want us to just discuss it along the others?
On the east,
You know, I didn't find the window to wall ratio inappropriate on this building, given the number of units. I don't think they're inappropriate, but you are more than welcome to discuss that amongst yourselves.
Okay, any other questions for Jana? Okay, well, let's proceed. Welcome again.
Hello again. So same team as before, we are talking about the Canyonlands East Building, and John will pull up the presentation. I just wanted to make one point of clarification on the PUD, which will be happening tomorrow night with planning and zoning. We have reduced the site coverage on the Canyonlands site, so we no longer are asking for that increase to 60% maximum. We're actually at 45% right now, which is allowed per code for having 50% of the parking spaces covered. So we actually don't have any PUD asks for this particular building. So I just wanted to point that out because our building height is within the height limit and we don't have any additional site coverage. Okay, so on to the next slide. This is again, the previously proposed site plan and the work session input from 1018. It's the same items that we just discussed. I can run through them briefly again, but it includes reducing mass and scale, bringing down the right-of-way encroachment, adding articulation, variation, and setbacks, stepping down building mass towards the street, providing pedestrian scale, and especially on Canyonlands East was that ridge line was over the 60 feet maximum. So if we go to the proposed site plan, so the design intent for the Canyonlands East building is really the traditional meeting hall design architecture. It wants to look like a single family home from Colorado Avenue and help step down the mass from Canyonlands Northwest to this building, as it is a 2-story building with a max height of 35 feet. This provides a similar scale to single family homes within the area. We also have reduced the ridge line, as I was mentioning, from just under 80 feet to just under 60 feet. And this step down occurs on the south facade of the primary ridge. It's similar style to the Elks Lodge in town, which has a 70-foot ridge line, an example, the meeting hall style building, traditional historic building. We've also made the roof gable symmetrical. Pass it over to you, John.
Okay. So this was the original design that you've previously seen. And the changes are fairly minor, but make a big difference. Essentially, we did have a longer roof to mimic that meeting hall style of architecture, but what we did is we cut it back and added a new roof form and then adjusted these balconies in closer. We also, per staff's feedback, made this roof more symmetrical, and so it doesn't have that kind of offset gable. And then we reduced the amount of windows. So we did go from double windows to single windows, which you can see here, and added a little bit of a break in those windows to help kind of break up the mass. So they got a little bit smaller essentially. And this is those elevations where you can see we added a hip roof to the back. We added the snow guards for the path that's beside the building. and then rearrange the internal units to create those balconies. And we did add the stair to the side to add a additional parking space, which got us to one-to-one parking, so we weren't asking for any parking exceptions. And that was the main reason. The reason it's enclosed is fire. It's too close to the property line, so it needed to be enclosed. So I think it can be designed a lot better, but that's kind of where it ended up, and that's where it came from. So, but that's what we have. And then this is the 3D. And we'll take any comments and feedback.
Could you walk around it?
Sure.
And the ridge length again is 59 feet.
59 feet and 11 inches, to be exact,
Okay.
approximately.
There's a lot of mature trees next door. And I think that does help, obscure some of this side, but we did still want it to feel though it's a nice facade if the trees were to go away, which hopefully they never did. But yeah, that's the building.
And that front facade is, with the 32 windows, verticality are those twice as long as they are wide?
Yeah, the individual proportions with the split in the middle meet the standard proportion of window. So we did want to keep them a reasonable size, but the double window meets the standard proportions.
Can you keep going?
Sure. So we need to trim a couple of the trees a little bit there. So yeah, there's the hip in the back, and then as you come around, we do have this kind of more balcony entrance with the staircase that takes
Can you
you up.
pause right there?
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions on that elevation?
Is it more advantageous to leave all those balconies exposed versus like concealing them? Just as like, the winter elements coming in, just make it, and you're probably gonna have to get someone to come and shovel some of that maybe when it snows.
Yeah, there will be some snow removal items there, but really to have these have windows on both sides of the units, we didn't want to enclose them. We wanted to have natural light going through the building, and so to accomplish that, that's why we have the open balcony.
Right, and is that the same concept with the stairs?
Yeah, it was really just to keep it more open and let light in.
Right, some of those buildings that are actually behind this one, the stairwells are enclosed and the walkways are open, so you still achieve the light there, but just to kind of reduce a little bit some of the massing.
Yeah, we didn't want this stair to feel too massive, even though it has the wall, so that's why we left it open, but we could enclose it.
And where is the west wall that John mentioned? Talking about.
The west wall, that's the stair wall there. So as you come down the ramp, you really just see the stair, but there is a wall behind it for fire protection. That's the wall she was referring to.
Sorry, no, actually, it's the
sorry.
wall along the drive.
All along the drive, the retaining wall, sorry, yeah. So we were gonna wrap that in the same stone, and Mallory has the stone type we're gonna use, but it is found throughout town.
The back part of it is where it's enclosing the parking area, covering the parking area. Right.
Yeah, and there we may do some utility space in that area. Right now, it's just an enclosed space that we may end up doing some water storage or other things to mitigate some of the water issues, but yeah.
Parking ends there. Parking is under. Yeah. That's 12 feet high.
No, this is 7.5 feet currently, so it's not that tall.
So what's your idea on John's condition stairway?
I think we can reclad it in a different, the two-tone doesn't really help things, but I think there could be some ways to treat it to make it less obvious.
She said, study the placement
Yeah, so if we rotate it, we'd lose a parking stall, which would put us under the one-to-one parking. The only other option would be to remove part of a unit and push it back into the building, which we haven't studied yet, so we don't know if it actually works, but that would be the only other option.
You can throw it behind there, the stairs behind it.
It'd be too close to the property line.
Right on the property.
Yeah. We wanted to do that, but it's a tricky spot. And we'd also lose the sidewalk that would take you around to that path as well. So. And it's mainly because it's an egress stair is why it's solid.
Other questions from the board?
I have a kind of a minor one. The posts that you're showing on the decks, are those sort of placeholders or is that what you're intending to do? They seem a little ornate throughout all of these projects compared to the rest of the architecture.
Yeah, they are kind of placeholder. We want to design those be a little more fitting. They kind of match some of the other projects, but we can make them a little less ornate, I think, on this building.
Essentially have to continue that, say, work down the stair.
The stair, yeah. That could be tucked in the side of that room. Help. But, Rachel, anybody have any questions about before we lose them into deliberation? Questions about that, Rachel?
This is kind of off subject just a little bit, but with any of these projects together, have y'all had any talks about maybe trying to implement a bus stop just to reduce the urge to want to drive in and out of this a lot to get traffic going towards town?
We have studied the walkability
One coming this
previously.
way, not going out of town.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So we have studied the walkability previously. So what a 5-minute walk versus a 10-minute walk would be. And we are within under a 10-minute walk to a bus stop and also the gondola, and town center. So we're not talking about adding an additional bus stop here because of the walkability that exists currently with our access to town.
Right. The only reason why I was asking is the one that's across from Clark's goes the other way.
Yeah.
And so just.
Okay.
Question, just in this view here, I thought this was the case in the elevations. Those windows don't sort of align as you track the corner. Is there a particular reason why you guys aren't aligning sort of window heads and sills?
No, there's not a reason. I think it just got moved. But those would align, and we haven't finalized 100% of the placement because the units are kind of still moving. This is the intent, but they may massage a little bit to make the units more functional. But yeah, it will align.
Does anybody have any questions about those recessed decks? I'm trying to think of something that we've approved before like that. I mean, we've had approved dormers, but that's not this. Anybody have any questions for them? This is because everybody has to have a balcony. So I don't know about it. Okay, any questions? Any more questions? Anybody have this in? Okay. So, thank you. We'll hear from the public.
Sherry Harvey's hand is raised.
Okay, go ahead. She unmuted.
I figured out how to find the raise hand thing. I wanted to say that the length of this building looks like a mistake. It looks like another arm of like the Telluride Lodge. And if there is a way to break it up in the middle, maybe not have it so tall or something to compartmentalize it. It looks like the boarding house up at Alta, like that mass and scale that you're trying to cram in a very small space. And maybe you didn't get as many units, but you could put some more trees to the west. It somehow provides some sound absorption. because it's kind of more Doka than Shandoka, and yet it's going to be on Main Street. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Anybody in the room?
I'll make it. How many units are in this?
Would you read your name again?
Oh,
Put
I'm
that on
sorry.
tape.
I'm Patty McIntosh, on the board of Telluride Lodge. How many units are in this building?
Technically, they can't talk. You can ask the question. and-
Oh, they can't
Yeah.
talk, sorry.
You would like to know
I
that,
don't
they can comment.
Okay. I agree with Sherry. I think it looks like a boarding house. And to have that at the entrance of town doesn't seem appealing.
Okay, any other public comments? Seeing none? Would you like to make a final comment? Littles?
I believe there's 11 units.
To answer the unit question,
Yeah.
there's 11. So, but thank you for the.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks. All right, we'll start deliberations. Again, does everybody agree we should continue per staff's recommendation? And is everybody in agreement with 1 through 7 before we add any new ones?
Yes.
Okay, other items we've talked about are the length of the Ridgeway, that's the line that John suggested, the public has spoken to, the height of the retaining wall. And I brought up the east windows, but we'll see where that dialogue goes. But do you have others you would like to add and or comment on any of those?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I would say that I think the bridge line's too long. And I think it would be, project would be more compliant if it would shorten, especially given the context of it as a residential development is something John spoke to. And I think adding John's suggested 8th condition about providing the height material, more detailed materials of the retaining wall would be appropriate as well.
Agree.
Good.
I can chime in.
Good, man.
So I appreciate the changes. They're small. I think I'm having the hardest thing for me is that you guys have referenced a couple of things, a single family residence for the scale and then the Elks building. And this is about, it's not quite double the size of Elks, but it's almost 2 stories taller. It's longer than Elks, not the overall ridge, but the body itself. And I think it's pretty evident when you look at the entry porch, the scale of that, if you can kind of pan out of this tree here, is sort of a residential appropriate scale. And then you see how it feels out of scale with the rest of the mass for the project. So I do appreciate the simple form. I appreciate it trying to speak to the old boarding houses. I actually like that. The scale is just pretty massive. So that's my sort of biggest comment on the mass and scale. I have a whole bunch of comments and guidelines cited for the windows. I don't feel that they're the right proportion. I think you've kind of gone the wrong direction with the windows here. They're actually quite large. They're 5.5 feet tall or so, and I don't know if they're 3 or so feet wide, maybe 4 feet wide. But I would like to see the windows move to more historic vertical proportions and be smaller and have less of them on the eastern side. And I think this applies to all of the windows in the project. There are some smaller square ones that would, the composition would feel much better. The scale would be more pedestrian if they were more traditional vertical scale protect vertical proportions.
Are you also suggesting that that the front porch be larger?
Yeah. So got a couple of things.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just
The scale of the entry is too small for, I mean, it makes it obvious that the building's out of scale. But if we are gonna live with this scale of a project, then that entry needs to be scaled up to be appropriate for the building. Those are my primary comments.
People would be happy if we said build something bigger. Bigger entry. How's that?
Just the scale of it is just
Yeah.
too small.
Right.
In proportion to the rest of the building.
Just take an advanced straw poll before we get to a motion. Does everybody agree with Matt's comments?
Kind of.
Which one's iffy?
Well, let me, before you take a poll, maybe let me
Let him.
read my note card.
Oh,
Um. Well, it's funny. So at first I wrote down here that, you know, the ridge length, I think should be broken up and stepped down. But then I realized, you know, that you added that shed form at the rear. And I think that goes a long way to alleviating my original concern. So I think that worked itself out from our feedback the last time, at least for me. I do continue to have concern with at least the north half of the east elevation. As you mentioned, there are pretty mature trees there now, which may or may not continue. It's almost as if that east elevation assumes an adjacent building. And because of the curve, and in Telluride, we have very few curved streets. This is almost a corner lot condition. And so that the north portion of the east elevation is highly visible, especially traveling westbound on Colorado Avenue. So I'm just concerned with how large and monolithic that plane is on the east property line. Again, in the packet, there were no, you know, perspective or context views looking southwest from across. This is helpful. I also wrote down though that I really do appreciate the effort to have as simple a form as possible. I think for me, where that starts to run into trouble is when it's not simple, right? The stairs aren't simple because they can't be yet. Those balconies up in the roof aren't simple, but they're required. Like that's when the simplicity starts to fall apart. And then because it falls apart, then you start questioning everything. I do like though that this is a different form in between the northwest building and the Tower House buildings, which are more similar to each other. I like that it's different and in between. And Matt is absolutely right that it's roughly maybe double of the Elks, but the form speaks to that vernacular. So I've warmed to this building. There you go.
How do you feel about the scale of the windows and scale of the entrance?
Well, I like the scale of each individual window, but when they're mulled together with a similar colored piece of trim in the middle, now it's a big square window.
Yes.
Now that's not a historic proportion. So I think if they were,
It'd be
They were-
more like the one that's on the building in the back. They've got I think there's a balcony and then there's a window to below it.
Yeah, the ones in the back are the correct
That one
proportion.
there seems,
You guys spin around to the back.
I mean, I like the dark trim, but it makes them look like big square windows, right? Instead of the historic proportion of twice the height of width.
that fix it?
Well, no,
Doesn't.
I want them to be pulled apart. I want there to be separation.
I agree, and I actually don't, I mean, I think we could look at them paired together, but I really think they should just go to one window in each.
Right, because then that's what's gonna happen. If you do what I said and pull it apart, now it looks like it's twice as many windows, right? And then oh my God, look at how many windows that is.
So
We were already there when it looked like one window. So if it looks like twice as many windows, now we really have trouble. So.
you know, just, it does look like there's a couple of 4 windows on, well, somewhere between 2 and 4 on the east side that don't have to be there to have light in each of those spaces and egress windows, so.
I like the pattern though. I don't want this to look like missing teeth.
For sure.
Right?
No, this is something some of the other projects in this packet have very disorganized window placements, and then I appreciate what this building is doing with its very generally organized placement. Stacey, I'd like to hear a little bit more about why you maybe don't like the sort of dormers. I think they're actually quite simple. There's 2 dormers, 2 small skylights. I appreciate what they're doing here with this roof.
You think it's too close to the front facade?
That would be better if it's moved back for sure.
As elements, I like them, but it chips away at this simple form, right? It's a complex thing now you see that isn't a simple gable form.
I actually think it gives them just the right amount of articulation on this project. I would be afraid if they were gone, that it'd be too simple. So maybe we disagree on that.
Well,
I
or
like, I
not.
like them. I just wonder if it needs to be pushed back, if there's a way to, I don't know, look at the plan.
That's the cool thing. I can be persuaded.
I think the big thing to talk about is just the mass and scale with the board, and then we can get into the weeds on the other things.
Okay, well, let's open it up to other people's comments here. How do you feel with respect to, well, we agreed with Jonas, but we're talking about additional guidelines, so feel free to comment.
Mark, is it okay if I ask a question?
No, unfortunately, we lost.
Um,
And
oh, yeah,
not allowed, but if we bring up something, however, we started doing this about 3 years ago, it was new and different for this board. Something we have not discussed and they never got the chance to comment on it, then we could allow this.
Because I feel there is an opportunity to move the trash containers, perhaps to incorporate them within the buildings, which would open up a parking spot, which would allow you to work out a staircase. And I believe that'll be also much better for the neighborhood and visuals and just, I don't know, just the mess with shared trash in the middle of a parking lot.
Are you saying have it like tucked under?
Yeah, kind of like the Owl Meadow building. I forgot the name. Just yeah, just out there, right? When it's like incorporated within the building, closed up, and not just sitting as a whatever sculptural form.
Yeah, well, we can't talk to him, but if you would just rotate that around in the back, so while we're discussing it, that'd be great. The south side.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So I would say reconsider trash location to be added as a condition as well.
Sorry. Well, actually, you never had a chance to comment, so I'm gonna allow it.
I appreciate it.
Take an exception here.
I love that idea, and we did try it. We put it in this space, this space here, and then we lose another stall for access. And so it's a trade. You're still losing a stall, but it is more hidden, so we can look at that. But yeah, you're right. It would be nice to hide it.
fountain.
All right. Well, let's keep this on the table for our deliberations here and perhaps the closure. So don't lose that thought. Did you, anything else you want to bring up?
Well, yeah, I appreciate the simplicity as well. With the stacking of the windows, I think it's just oversimplified, and we talk about reinterpretation of traditional forms, and sorry, I'm like looking to my guides. Also, yeah, 27 architectural character, new interpretations of traditional building styles are encouraged. This is extremely generic, and this is in the beginning of town. This is 2023, it's not 1980s, somewhere in the Midwest. I would love to see something more interesting. I know it's affordable housing. I know you guys are trying very hard. But it's, I don't know if maybe variation of materials and working with the, a little bit more of, hierarchy of materials. Exploring that a bit more. I agree with Bob about making the entry porch a little bit larger. It would help scale better. And yeah, those are my comments.
Thank you. And I think Matt has something with window trim in here that might,
Mm.
and we can see if that
Okay.
works. Let's see, different. And Kieran, anybody else?
I mean, just referencing 23 mass and scale, a larger building, you know, we've obviously given them a little direction from the first one, but kind of going off some people's comments, and it says a larger building may be divided into modules that reflect the traditional scale of construction. And modules should be expressed three-dimensionally by having significant architectural changes throughout the entire building, and this one doesn't really have that as much. Significant architectural.
The place that I'm butting my head up against that is they're trying to follow this archetypal form of a boarding house, which I think is a good goal. And if you start to erode that too much, it's loses that form.
Is this the Black Diamond building? No. I'm referencing the guidelines. Right next to I is a photo of a building which is this archetypal form. Now it's articulated more, and I should share it with everyone that doesn't have a guideline book in front of them, but I think there's on the same page that Andrew's referencing is a very similar form to the one they're proposing. Now it's it's got an entryway, an auto entryway, and a kind of a wraparound deck. So it's different. It's not exactly the same, but I don't mind this as a simple counterpoint to these other forms which are so broken up.
I agree.
Although that page 137 photo would help with the ridge line.
Yes.
I think that's one reason why it's in there.
Might be.
Imagine that. Okay. What else?
You all have a copy of the guidelines and you can track down that image that I'm referring to. Great.
I mean, in terms of adding something new, or
Yeah.
I don't have anything
Good with us formulating it.
more. I mean, I think the only thing that I'd think would make it less compliant with the guidelines, and there's a push and pull with the correcting the scale of the porch and adding more mass and scale, that which one should take precedence there?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think that it seems disproportionately small, but then there is an extreme, and hopefully they don't make the porch the width of the building. They're not taking that extremism in mind, but that's a valid concern. I mean, are you thinking 3 feet wider?
I just think right now it doesn't relate to the scale of the overall structure, number one. Number two, it doesn't do enough to help break down any mass and scale. It's more like just a little wart on the front of the building instead of a significant piece of mass. So I think that they could figure out a way to grow it. Not gonna tell them how to do it. They can figure that out.
But an overhang would also help break
Yep.
down
For sure.
the step down.
Yep.
Okay.
I had some comments about plantings and parking screening, similar comment to work session before. What we have in front of here is one tree. To me, that doesn't seem like enough. I still feel like all these projects would be better served if they were pushed a little bit farther back to the south, and that there were more trees and more mature landscape buffer between the buildings and Colorado Avenue.
Okay.
And I did have comments about parking screening, mostly from the sort of the eastern side, but seems like they're doing with showing the vegetation here. It seems like it don't have that concern anymore.
Okay. All right. Let me try to gather these up as I've written them, and we're going to assign different people. different conditions, that we can. The person who makes the motion can get as many as they want, but then we can add on friendly amendments. So what the ones I have are, John is number 8, the height retaining wall on the east side. Be number 9, ridge line breakup per page 137, that photo would have. Windows, I wrote down, Elisa and Matt said more historic or the interpretation, but also smaller, more verticality and less number on the east side only. So maybe that'll be your condition. The roof on the east decks, not traditional. Oh, did we have consensus that we're okay with those dormer inset decks, other than maybe relocate them to the south? So they're not as visible from the street, perhaps? So I heard,
I like that.
relocate south. The 2/3 light doors, which although there's not a separate reference, I already looked it up, but you can cover it under windows. If the door should have traditional 2/3 light, that's probably go under windows, because under doors, it doesn't have that specific language, but we, as a policy, force that all over every zone. Note to the guideline revisers. Enlarge the entry. Under mass and scale, break up the east plane or the monolithic look on that east facade.
Mm-mm.
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
That. Then we see he's coming to us there.
I had that thought initially,
Okay, so you're good with it.
but like I said, I think every move we make that makes this more complicated is a negative. When I first, I think this is the importance of having 3-dimensional representations like this, whether it's in a packet or whether it's on the screen like this. That elevation in elevation kind of made my hair stand on end. Seeing it here and the simplicity of that form is, I'm like I said, I'm warming to it. I'm reading it differently. Can
Okay.
experience the world in 3 dimensions. Boom.
Did anybody else still have concern?
I agree with Stacy. I had the same negative reaction from the elevations, and now seeing it in 3D and I'm spinning around, I'm feeling better about it.
Same for me.
Okay with that? Okay, that's a good thing. Crossed it off. Move the trash container, or are we gonna use the word consider or explore? What do you want to do in this motion?
Yeah, I wouldn't be so prescriptive with actually.
They consider.
I think they already indicated
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
Okay, consider. But it was a good point. And push on the front facade, same comment as the last time, further back away from the right of way to allow more mature tree plantings. Of course, we know what's gonna happen on the backside then, but is that something that the guidelines would support under mass scale and setbacks? So there are several guidelines. Do we all share this concern without specifying the feet?
I share that concern. The most of the guidelines that I cited were having to do with providing enough space for mature landscaping and planting, so.
Well, this one's deeper than the other one. The other building, there is more room to plant. I don't know if you can get them that close and have them live, but there certainly is a possibility of where the people are standing to their left to do more vertical types of landscape.
Would you support Matt's suggestion that should go further back though, to give a little more depth in the street, not just width of landscaping, but depth?
I don't know, it sets back from this view, you're set back further from the adjacent building.
I'm less concerned about it not seeing it in 3D than I was before, but I still think it would be great if all of these projects would move farther to the north. Right to the south.
So you want to use the word consider?
Sounds good to me.
Are you making this motion?
I can.
Okay. You had a reaction from the crowd. Did I miss anything? All right, so, well, Matt, maybe you've got them all. Painting wall, ridge line, windows, relocate the east decks to the south. 2/3 light door, which should be with the windows to mirror traditional, that glass, enlarge the entry, move trash container, consider. And consider pushing back away from the right of way on the north elevation to allow for more mature plantings. Really thought for a minute I saw Christmas tree lights lighting up there in blue, but I guess must have been my imagination.
Jonna has her hand raised.
Jonna,
Oh, thank you. Just a reminder maybe to discuss with the applicants the next meeting date and if that is agreeable with them.
okay, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
reminder. While we're working on the motion language, is the 17th what you want?
Yes.
We're here to
Assuming
serve.
tomorrow goes well.
Okay, you're in.
Great.
Okay. Don't look like you won the lottery. All right. Think you're ready, Matt?
Sure. I'll give this a shot. I'll probably need some friendly amendments to help out here. So I move to continue to the January 17th, 2024 HARC meeting, the applications for final small scale new construction for the Canyonlands East Building, Lot 3, Block 1, Canyonland subdivision based on the staff memo dated December 13th, 2023, and with the following conditions 1 through 7 as stated. Number 8, revise the deck and stair post details per AC 29A and AC 28A. Number 9, increase the scale of the entry porch to be more in scale with the overall building and provide stepping down to the street for AC 28D and AC 2B, C, and D.
10.
Number 10, adjust window proportions and size to be more traditional and reduce number of windows on the eastern elevation per AC 32, AC 32A, AC 32C1, and AC 32B2. Number 11, consider increasing the front setback to allow for more mature trees and landscaping for AC 17, AC 17A, AC 17B, and B1, AC 17G. And I'm gonna leave it at that, but I know we need at least
The
friendly
ridge
amendment on
line,
it.
you want to do the ridge line or no? Okay.
Kieran will second if you're done with it.
Okay, my notes, well, that's
Any friendly amendments?
friendly amendments,
I didn't cover the 2/3 light doors, so.
which would be included in the windows, and then
Jonas, what about this?
Yeah, John, I had another one that was.
ridge line.
No, the height of the retaining wall at the west,
Yeah,
but I don't know if I ever got them.
I didn't look for it.
okay, and trash container. And what guideline is that under?
It's service,
Service areas?
the 2021.
21 service areas.
Okay. So who wants to make friendly amendment? We gotta get the guideline for the 60-foot ridge. I have that. Oh, there it is. 26. The one.
There's also a 23J if you want to look at that, but
23J,
Mhm.
26B1. All right, so we got Ridgeline, we've got 2/3 light doors to add to the number 10 perhaps, and then we've got the trash container, which is 21. And then, yeah, that's it. Well, anybody want to try it or not? I'll just read my notes.
probably should.
Okay, well, I can hardly read them.
This is a
So,
condition, an additional condition, number 12.
I think this is a friendly amendment because Karen's already seconded.
I was just getting ready to say I'd like to offer a friendly amendment. Okay. And this will be, as you say, number 12. Number 12, reduce or break up the peak ridge line for 23I and 26B1. Number 13.
But we have to accept,
Oh, one at a time,
One
yeah.
at a
yeah,
Sorry.
I'll accept that.
accept that as well.
Okay, thank you. 13. Comply with 2/3 light doors per condition number 10. So do we want to make that number 13 or do we want to? All right, I'll just leave it as 13. Comply with 2/3 light doors per section 32, A, B, and C.
I'll accept that.
Accept that as well.
Okay. Number 14. Consider moving the trash container for accommodations 21 service areas.
I'll accept that.
Accept that.
Did we do the retaining wall on the east side? No. Okay, so number 15. Reduce the height, the retaining wall on the,
Wasn't reduced height.
what,
Just provide more information. She has it on.
oh, it's in her write-up.
Mhm.
Okay, let me just go to that. Use Jonna's words. There we go. Oh, it's under under the stairs, or is it under
It's under no, policy 18.
18?
Mhm.
There it is. Okay. So our number 15 is provide height and material details of this wall consistent with 18C and D, and this wall meaning the west wall.
I'll accept that.
I accept that as well.
This wall.
You got it?
Or what was the policy?
It was 30. Hang on. Last one?
Last one was 18.
18 C and D.
18 C and D. For John is right up on page 8. Okay.
You have to finish now.
Oh, sorry. Okay, this motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on December 13th, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
All right.
You need to vote.
Let's do that.
We ready? Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Mark,
Bob, yes.
where are we? Okay. Very good. Thanks for the progress on that. And don't go anywhere. Again. Very unusual, very unusual. Our second public hearing is on the Tower House. Consideration of an application for the Tower House condos west, a small scale application for new construction outside of the THLD that will contain 2,000 square foot or more of area, but not more than 5,000 for land use code 7203 B2 B1. Tower House condos east, a small scale application for new construction outside of the TTLD will contain 2,000 square foot or more of floor area, but not more than 5,000. Code 7203B2B1. And C, an substantial scale application for the demolition of a non-designated structure for land use code 7203B1C2. Legal description lots 31 and 32 Bachman Village, West Telluride, and lot 33 Bachman Village subdivision, West Telluride. Address is 650 through 654 West Colorado. It's in the accommodations 2 district, block 23 Housing Corp. A Colorado nonprofit, applicant Norris Design, and staff member Jonna Wenzel. Jonna.
Okay, thanks, Mark. HARC also held a work session in October on all of the Tower House projects. It was one work session. This site is located on the south side of Colorado Avenue and the west side of Tomboy Street. It's in the accommodations 2 zone district and the accommodations treatment area. The existing Tower House is a condominium structure that was built around 1982. Again, here's the streetscape. We're just moving east on Colorado Avenue. This project proposes demolition of the non-historic Tower House condo building, a new construction of 2 new condominium buildings that are being called the Tower House West and the Tower House East, both which front on Colorado Avenue. Both of these applications are small scale, as each of the buildings are less than 5,000 square feet. They are almost identical, but a separate plan set for each building has been provided in the packet. I have combined them into one staff memo, but the comments are generally the same for both. The south building, which is called the Tower House Townhomes, will be a separate large-scale application and will come to HARC for review after the approval of the conceptual PUD by P&Z, which I've already discussed. The buildings, as I mentioned, are pretty much the same except for a few minor differences. The east building has an intersecting gable on the east facade facing Tomboy Street, which provides some architectural interest. Once again, staff is recommending that these 3 applications, the demolition and the 2 small scale applications, be continued to the January 7th HARC meeting. If again, that date is acceptable to the applicants. And the criteria for demolition apply to the existing Tower House structure. Staff finds that all of these criteria are met. If you decide to continue these applications tonight, the move to continue includes the demolition. So you would not need to take action on the demolition tonight separately. So I have included some conditions in the proposed conditions in the memo. The first one is to ensure that the front porches do not cross the property line. We often see front porches in the front setback. The land use code certainly allows for that. We never see parts of the structure cross the property line. And in this case, because they're moving the property line, it seems to make sense that they could move it to the location that could accommodate the entire building on the site. Condition number 2 is to more clearly define the front entrances. Each building has 3 front entrances. None of them are clearly defined, and the railings on the porches of the left and right units seem to obscure those entrances even more. Condition number 3, again, like the previous one, is to provide a landscape plan with species and quantities of plants. Again, number 4 is the same. The stone should appear to be a native type stone. And here, number 5 is to provide a clear distinction between the foundation and wall material. The foundation material is used as the wall material on the first level of these buildings, and the guidelines recommend distinguishing between the foundation and the wall. Condition number 6 is to provide a cut sheet of proposed light fixtures that are consistent with the lighting standards. And condition number 7 is to replace the sconces on upper level decks with step lights. and to replace the sconces on the upper walls of the south and east facades of the west building and the south facade of the east building with step lights. There are a number of sconces that are above the ground level, which is not appropriate per the lighting standards. And then condition number 9, again, is the same as the previous, is that final approval of these applications is contingent upon approval of the conceptual PUD. And that's it for my presentation. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for Donna?
Just to make sure I understand the front entrance is it's the recessed entry that serves the upper levels.
So there are 3 entries on each building. So the center one accesses the upper levels, but none of them really are very clearly defined. I appreciate the use of the front porches, which is encouraged by the guidelines, but none of the entries are really highlighted or celebrated like the guidelines recommend.
Here.
Okay, we'll hear from the applicant if you want to share your screen.
Good evening again. We are showing again the previously discussed site plan from our work session back in October. Some of the discussion that was had was to step down the buildings towards Colorado Avenue and Tomboy, add more building articulation and eliminate the hip roof. So we are talking about the northern portion of the site, as Jonna mentioned, so Tower House Condo West and Tower House Condo East. Both of those buildings have been revised to be below the 35-foot height limit, so we are not asking for an additional height increase, and we feel that this creates a nice transition from the Canyonlands neighborhood over to the Tower House neighborhood, with having, as you head into town, continuing that 35-foot maximum height towards the historic downtown. Additionally, we have added a 5-foot sidewalk along Tomboy. I believe it was 3 foot when we saw you previously, but we have increased that to make sure it's 5 feet. And we have been working with Public Works to have a sidewalk along Colorado Avenue that's 7 feet in width. So substantial access to those buildings along Colorado Avenue, and other access points are highlighted in yellow for pedestrian connectivity throughout the site, as well as open space and landscape. I think that was what we wanted to hit on this slide, and I'll just turn it over to John to talk more about the elevations.
Yeah, so to give you guys a little bit of history on the project, basically we've designed this several different ways. Originally, it was all one design. The whole thing was one massive building, and that was part of where we started to pivot and think, how can we break down the mass and scale of this building? And so what we did is we split it into 3 separate buildings, the townhomes in the back, and then the 2 condo buildings in the front. And that was really kind of where we wanted to put our efforts into kind of breaking that down. Some of Jonna's comments, I did want to address our design thinking on some of those and then get your feedback. I'd love to hear the direction on that. But the overall idea was that the first floor would traditionally, a lot of these homes would be built out of stone for that first floor, and then you build wood above. And that was the idea, was that the whole first floor was that foundation. By splitting and adding another line and element, it does start to get a little bit busy when it comes to that vertical element. So that's why it is this way. But we're open to the feedback. Same thing with the entrances. We did lower the entire building on both sites to be under the 35 feet. We felt the porches really did help define those buildings. I will jump into the 3D. But we would love feedback on if there is a more specific way to add definition to those entries. Because these do need to be type B ADA units, we do have some ramps going up to the front, which help kind of provide that. And then these upstairs entrances are off of the center here. But yeah, so that's the major changes. And then as we go around the side, we worked towards reducing the facade length by adding a bump out on this end and creating a more corner facing building to help break that up. It is a narrow site, so we are a little bit restrained on how much we can articulate the buildings and facade dimensions. So, yeah, that's our presentation.
Can you walk around again? We can see the building in the back.
Sure.
Oh, no, that was actually not part of this project. Okay.
Right.
Never mind.
But this is the between space. This will be landscaped and have a pathway.
And how many feet back from the right of way is this one compared to the east that we just did? It looks, is it close?
So are you asking how many feet it was shifted back?
Yeah, I can read the chart.
Um,
How far did this go back? That backs,
Well, I think it varies. They're not parallel.
this is no.
It varies. It was shifted back approximately a half a foot overall for that facade building, but
But we did step the facades
Yeah.
so that they create that articulation, which was really hard to see in those elevations that you guys originally had. But that was where we did the articulation, was per building or per vertical element.
And what's that roof pitch? I'm sorry, I don't remember from my notes.
It's 12-12, I believe.
12.
Yeah, we tried to get as many of those in there as we can.
Programmatically, what's in that huge volume upstairs with
So that
16 feet to the ceiling?
that is a loft.
What's the loft bedroom?
Yeah, it starts at 7 feet at
Okay,
the
I got
wall.
it. I saw it, okay.
Yeah. You double check that pitch.
Huh. Okay, so questions?
Sorry, it's actually 10-12. Sorry.
Okay,
I do have a simple, I think, simple question I could have asked during the first item. The pink color in the roof plans, is that the portion above the median? Or,
Yeah, John asked us to show anything above the 35 feet, but the median is
Yeah.
below. So
I get the calculation. I just didn't.
Yeah, that was just a request, so we added it in.
Okay.
that's the median, but the peak of the gable is more than 35.
Correct, just the way you measure height, it's under 35.
And so again, this 3D imagery, I'm glad you did it. I wish it's making me think a little differently than many people have already commented. And I don't want to lose you before you could reply to this. I'll just ask this another question on the, here we go, third story again. What could you do to change, have a little change in wall plane to set that back? And again, we'll get to the board deliberations and see how everybody feels, but I'm just asking the question, what could you do to perhaps set that back a little further? I mean, they don't get a deck up there. I thought everybody had to have a deck.
So this is
Part
a
of the.
this is a
Oh, that's
two-story
right.
unit and they get the
Sorry.
deck here. So,
Then Uncle John in the loft gets to come down to the second floor deck. Okay.
yeah.
Could rise in the back.
Yeah.
Do you mind zooming out a bit so we can
Sure.
see more of the context of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so we did look at that step back. It really eats into the bedroom and kind of makes it a non-viable space. So we did look at that. So our setback was the porch features as well as stepping the buildings back over the full elevation. And that was the compromise. we
So
made.
stepping back,
Between these building forms is where the
Yeah.
step back happens is right here. So,
yeah, separating the buildings, but yeah.
and then the roof itself on the porches.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, we'll hear from the public. All the public went home here, but
Sherry Harvey's hand is
But-
raised.
electronically, okay, let's see. Yes, Sherry, go ahead, unmute and welcome your comments.
Hi, I wanted to highlight a few things that I've heard you guys talk about that I think are important for your deliberations. And one is what you just said, Mark. I think the change in the wall plane and setting back the third level would be more compatible with the surroundings, like the Gold Belt building across the street. I think these buildings are seemingly way too tall and way too close to the street. So again, I would increase the setback from the street to create some more mature landscaping. I don't think the goal is to squeeze in as many units as possible, because what I tried to say in my public comment is that when they've tried to do that on other projects, you get really uncomfortable and unattractive units. So changing the third level, the setback to the east should be somewhat compatible to that white building as shown there. And so if you happen to lose a bedroom, it's not the end of the world. It's better that it's designed well from the outside and the inside rather than we squeeze in more people. I also think acoustically, all of these projects are very poorly designed and we need more landscaping to absorb sound. And these curvy sidewalks are also ridiculous. People aren't going to walk in the curve or ride their bike in the curve. And I don't think you should expect people to actually follow that sidewalk. So whatever you need to do to straighten it out and make the street safe and the pedestrian safe, I think that's a much better approach. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see anybody with their hands up. You, Piper?
I don't.
Okay. Do you have any last comment on the third floor setback and or the pushback from the right of way?
We don't have any further comments
Okay.
on that.
Okay. But we'll begin deliberations. Can you hold that angle right there? That'd be good. Thanks. So, does everybody agree with conditions 1 through 9, first of all?
Yes.
Okay. Make short work of that. Does anybody have any concern, as we said, at least used on the last two? The setback from Colorado, which has been moved.
Mark, I do want to provide, well, this is discussion, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to maybe expand on a couple of these.
Sure.
I think the front entrances could easily be more well-defined. I think what's misleading sometimes is the sidewalk sometimes leads to a door, sometimes it leads to the center. Sometimes, the door is not centered, but the opening in the railing is centered. Like, it's a little incongruous. The easternmost unit here, I mean, I wouldn't propose pulling that sidewalk all the way to the east so the sidewalk lined up with the door, but perhaps that door should just be flipped to the other side, if that works in plan. I mean, I know that's probably a big exercise, but I think it'd be fine if the railing, the sidewalk, and the door aligned. Now you're defining that entry, and maybe that's enough. I think right now it's just that it's a little, on the second one in there, the sidewalk leads to the door, but there's a railing in the way of it. Right, you have to go actually move around the railing.
That doesn't lead to the door.
Right, it doesn't lead.
It leads to the deck.
That's the
So
mis-
anyway, I think there's just this center line thing that can be pretty easily,
So you're commenting on
Resolved.
her number 2 on how to do it.
well, yeah, more information as opposed to less.
Okay.
Can I
Um,
jump in on this?
yeah,
The center door really gets lost, I think, in these projects.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering if somehow, like you did on the other projects, where it may be an element that goes through, it separates the two bodies of the building rather than just tucked in there and then the building comes over top of it. Just wonder if that's feasible. The way it's laid out at the moment, I don't think it will, because the location of interior units, the interior pieces of the interior units. But I think that it's really lost, that entry is really lost there. And I agree about, you got center entry on some of them. One of them is is in front of the door. That one makes most sense, the one where the woman is standing right now, that you're coming to the door. And I think the other ones, you should come to the door and articulate that recessed entry in some other way so that it reads as just as important an entry as the other two.
You mean deeper?
Well, it needs an element. It needs something
It's a
to,
back
to
door
announce
kind
it
of
as
There's nothing to
as an
announce
entry to,
right now.
right. It almost looks like a,
Sidewalk's the only.
it looks like a secondary garage door entrance or a
Sort of.
trash enclosure entrance or something.
It's articulation.
Okay.
I agree with, number 5, provide a clear distinction between the foundation wall material consistent, because there's a guideline that says that's what you should do. I like that you pulled the stone up higher. Maybe it's as simple as having a fairly rubble, dry stack stone below with a
Needs to be relieved.
a lintel or a
Cap.
a cap and then a different stone maybe above, something to distinguish the low foundation. Yeah, because right now there's no foundation distinction. You see that on historic. All the foundations were stone because they built the foundations out of stone.
There weren't too many that were they usually were foundations low, not whole stories of stone.
I appreciate stone as material. I'm not trying to reduce the amount of stone. If the town wants, if the applicant wants to spend money on more stone, that's fine. But there needs to be some definition at the foundation line. So maybe that's what 6 could say, or 5 could say. Well, and that is what it says, a distinction between the foundation and the wall above.
Okay. What about the third floor setback on the north side?
Yeah, that's been consistent throughout the evening.
I mean, it is a tall wall plane.
Well, and
It's on the corner.
Huh?
It's on a corner.
Well, that's further defined by the guidelines as begging for setback.
Yes.
Have we agreed? Or step back for the guidelines?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a comment. So I've appreciated this component of this overall project more than any other piece of it. And I think what I like about it is its simplicity of the proportions of the gable forms, even though it's too tall, in my opinion. The mass is but I'm not sure if the repetition of the same forms and the same articulation of the decks, there's nothing to distinguish these from being, that sort of gives it away. It's just all one, it takes, was 2 buildings, but it seems like there needs to be a different architectural moves
4 in a row.
through 4 in a row. And I absolutely feel that northeast corner needs to come down to 2 stories and change its architecture, its form. So that will help if that pink building changes, the architecture comes down to 2 stories, that will relieve some pressure from the remaining 3. And I don't know if it would be enough to articulate the decks differently, the roofs differently. They did a good job on the larger building of having some open decks and enclosed decks. So some of those techniques could help. Changing just the roofs over those second level decks could help. And I'm not sure if that would be enough for me, because I do appreciate the economy of what they're trying to do. It's just, I can't think of any other project on Colorado Avenue that's got this much repetition. And I can't find a guideline really to support I don't think it really contemplates repetition like this in the forms.
Somewhere in the building form, but you already looked, huh?
Yeah.
Keep looking away, I was thinking. Anybody want?
I agree with everything Matt just said.
Okay.
I think that it does kind of help break it up and not make it look as part of one assemblage.
Going to 2 stories on that end.
I was commenting overall, but I was kind of talking about the consistency with the front, with those north facades.
I wonder too, if you didn't continue the stone into the, the bumps of, for
Certainly would help.
that sets back. That to me just seems like it's just not right. It's just, I don't know what the word would be, the guideline would be, but, the stone could be articulating each building differently.
Correct.
Inside ones are not stone, whatever. Done it a different way, just so they read more as individual units.
So, I mean, that's how I feel about it, but I hear others talk about it as well, because people may appreciate the economy of them being the same. Do we want to talk about massive scale more, or do you want to get into more detail?
No, massive scale more, I think.
The rest of mine are more nuanced.
Windows compliant.
I think the same comments.
If there's light on the upper level.
Yep.
That's
I think with this one, this project too, the organization of the windows seems to be all over. There seems to be no organization in the windows. It's purely driven by the plan with seemingly no corresponding exterior considerations.
County entering.
2/3 light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2/3 layers. Those and see the 2/3 light hit.
I've got that.
So sounds like any other different comments? Sounds like we want to comply, it would be better, more compliant to have 3rd floor, north setback. The front center door, which is in John is number 5, actually, but so I'm gonna add it. And then the windows, and then the northeast corner down to 2 stories at straw pool. Okay with that? I mean, I think it'd make a huge difference driving down the street.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then this whole north facade, the subject of repetition with articulation, materials, including stone, something so that they're not just 4 clones. Is that everybody would like to see something a little different? I mean, architectural elements can help with that. I mean, this is not a big
Doesn't have to
thing.
be huge changes.
I struggle a little bit with that because defensible decision making would have it rooted in the guidelines. And I don't see it as apparent. On a personal level, I would prefer not to weigh in, but that's all I can really say. If it's not rooted in the guidelines, I feel uncomfortable with.
Okay.
Basically,
I did find under AC 6 E and F, it's just not very strong.
Which number?
6
6.
E and F.
6. The visual interest on all facades. There you go. Elevation. And F. For sure, E does.
Yeah, I think F2, the building should express human scale through materials and forms that are familiar building elements in town. So I think the part of that is really more the form.
Okay.
G talks about varied building setbacks and changes in material to create interest in perceived scale.
That's along alleys. Yeah.
That's 16 F vice. So we have the 3rd floor north setback, which is under pedestrian scale and mass and scale. There's two guidelines which we just used previously. The windows, which is 32. Maybe see, northeast corner would be under mass and scale. 23. Got a number, Tracy or Stacy did it?
Well, it's 23. Where's the one about a mix of 1 and 2 story?
Yeah.
Yeah, D. 23D, building.
Yep.
Heights should be a variety, including some 1 and story elements, 1 and 2 story elements.
Oh, there's also 23E, sorry, 3. No, 23.23.3. Variations in facade treatment should be continued throughout the structure, including its roof line, front and rear facades, such that the composition appears to be a collection of smaller buildings.
C3.
Yeah,
Is it C?
C3.
I'm sorry.
C3. Okay, we've got all the guidelines cited, I guess. Good discussion. So,
Sorry for piling on, but I've just been looking through the plans. I don't see any. There should have been a question for the applicant, bicycle storage, gear storage.
well, we can pick that up after the continuation, but you can put it in there now.
Sorry, I have that written down for different.
No, I was just adding.
No.
We're not gonna see that.
Right. Sorry.
While you're looking up that, I have the same comment about the deck post details. AC 29A and AC 28A.
The decks?
Yes. So they have the same deck post detailing.
Oh.
It seems, doesn't seem like it's following the rest of the architecture.
Okay. All right. Who wants to try it?
You want to do all those as a friendly amendment then?
It'd be better to just get them in there.
You got them.
If we can get them, let's just finish it. So third floor north setback is 30 or 20. Mass scale, multiple places as well as pedestrian scale, so it's 20.
There's C3 is 1, and then Stacy had 1.
And D.
Yeah. Well, and D is already on the northeast corner.
And
Also.
B talks about provide 1 and 2 story elements at property edges.
B3, so that'll go on the northeast corner, B3. Okay. And so, there's one more for third floor setback, 23C3, but the pedestrian scale,
That would be AC 6, E and F.
what number?
6.
Yeah, 6, AC3. Yeah, okay. All right. Sounds like you got them all, Matt.
Bicycle systems, 7A2. Provide bicycle parking and storage facilities, which I think it'd be easy on the south side. It's already a daylight crawl space anyway. Sorry.
Okay. Stacy, you gonna try this one or are we gonna have Matt do it?
He's been taking notes.
I don't have all your notes, but I can work with what I have and you can do it from what.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I move to continue to the January 17th, 2024 HARC meeting, the applications for final small scale new construction for the Tower House East condos and West condos and the insubstantial scale demolition of the non-designated principal structure located at 650-654 West Colorado Avenue based on the staff memo dated December 13th, 2023, and with the following conditions. 1 through 9 as stated. Number 10, adjust window proportions, size and placement to be more traditional and ensure all doors are no more than 2/3 lights per AC 32, AC 32A, AC 32C1, and AC 32B2. Number 11, revise the deck post details per AC 29A and AC 28A. Reduce the northeast massing from 3 stories to 2 stories on the corner per AC 23B3, AC 23C3, AC 23D. And differentiate between the differentiate the architecture between the 4 gable forms per AC 6E and F.
Is this number 13? Or is it? all
That should have been number 13. That's correct.
13, okay.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Did you do the third floor no setback under, that would be number, was that?
12.
12, okay. Thanks. And then we had bike storage.
14.
Pick that up a friendly amendment. So we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay,
I'd like to invite some friendly amendments.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment. Provide bicycle parking and storage facilities per AC 7A2.
this would be 14.
14.
I'll accept that.
I'll accept that.
Double check. If 2 number 12s, the northeast corner and the third floor north setback, we didn't combine them, did we?
I put, so I have 11 is the revised post details and 12 is reduce the northeast massing. And 13 is the differentiate that I didn't get the full sentence on that one yet, but
Yeah.
is that right?
That's what I have.
Yes,
Okay.
but where was the third floor north setback? Number what?
We, I don't think we ever came
not
back
separate.
around to setback increase.
So I'd like to make a friendly amendment. Which would be number 15. Setback, the third floor north elevation for 23C3, 6AC3, or AC 63. E and F. That's 3 E and F.
Say 16,
That's 15, man.
15. I'll accept that.
I'll accept that.
Everybody good? Okay. Let's vote.
Kiernan, yes.
Well,
Yep, yep,
this
yep.
motion.
Yep. This motion is based on evidence testimony provided at a public hearing held on December 13th, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Kiernan, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Yes.
Bob, yes.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. And now you can go. And again, thank you for the progress. 2 out of 3, you're almost there, and hope you take our comments seriously so we can get compliance the next round. Thank you. Okay, our last,
Mark, before you open the last item, I am recused. Conflict of interest, whatever. you call it.
thank you. Holidays. Okay, our last public hearing is at 4:53 West Pacific. It's a continuation. October 18th. It's consideration of applications for a small scale addition in the accommodations zone 1 district located inside the THLD that will increase the structure's floor area by more than 25% resulting in the building will contain more than 1,000 square feet, but less than 5,000 square feet per land use code 203A2B3. Small scale repositioning of a THS primary structure per land use code 7203B3B6. Minor scale repositioning of a THS secondary structure per land use code 7203B3C4. D is minor scale alteration of a rated structure that does not increase the floor area per land use code 7203A3. E, a minor scale new construction of the accommodations, one zone district, which will contain less than 2,000 square feet of floor area per land use code 7203A2C1. F, minor scale alteration of a rated structure that does not increase its floor area per land use code 7203A3C. G, insubstantial scale demolition of a non-designated secondary structure per land use code 7203A3D8. Legal description is block 5, lot 14, and the west half of lot 13, West Telluride addition at 453 West Pacific. It's in the accommodations 1 district, owner Telluride 453 LLC. Applicant Alpine Planning, staff member Jonna Wenzel. Jonna.
Okay, thank you. This was continued from the October 18th HARC meeting with 15 conditions. And just to refresh your memory, the property is located on the north side of Pacific Avenue between Townsend and Aspen Streets. The house is rated supporting and the shed is rated contributing, and they are all inside the historic district. This project proposes an addition to the supporting primary structure, repositioning the primary structure 3 feet to the east, alterations to the primary structure, repositioning of the contributing shed to the south by 2 feet, alterations to the shed, new construction of a secondary structure, and demolition of a non-designated secondary structure. Again, the standards for demolition are included, and each of the standards A5 through A9 must be met. Staff finds that these standards are met for demolition, and a separate motion is in the memo for the demolition of this non-designated shed. The contributing shed has been altered with an addition and these south-facing windows and a door over time. The previous conditions from October have been mostly addressed by these revisions, and I'll just go through those quickly. The previous condition number 1 was to revise the new addition to be clearly distinguishable and subordinate to the historic building. Previously it was in line with the addition's roof was in line with the historic roof, and now there's a stepping down to the addition, and it's been stepped in from the historic mass, which staff finds is compliant. Condition number 2 is to reduce the number of dormers, reduce the size of the remaining dormers, and ensure that they're not visible from the front facade. They have reduced the number of dormers from, I think, 5 to 1. And condition number 3 is to remove the west gable to better preserve the historic roof form. Previously, there was an addition of this west-facing dormer, which has been eliminated and is compliant. Condition number 4 is to revise the front porch or patio to better reflect the historic size and form. Previously, there was a very large deck proposed at the front that's been scaled back to be more in line with the historic front porch. And number 5 was to revise the bay window structure and windows to be no larger than what currently exists. That has been revised back to its more existing form. Condition number 6 was to remove or revise the 3-pack of doors on the east facade of the historic house to better reflect designs found historically. The 3-pack was here. Those have been replaced with 2 windows. Condition number 7 was to reduce the size of the new windows on the east elevation under the dormers. Those have been reduced minimally, but that condition has been kept. Condition number 8 was to remove the skylights from the historic gable form and reduce the number of skylights. The number of skylights have been reduced by 1, and the skylights have been removed from the historic gable form at the front. Number 9 was to revise the brick chimney to clearly show that it's part of the new development. The chimney has been eliminated altogether. Condition number 10 was to revise the 3-pack of doors throughout the proposal to contain less glass. All of the 3-pack doors have been reduced to 2-packs, and condition number 11 was to reduce the size of the 3-pack doors on the primary structure and south elevation of the garage. The 3-pack of doors has been reduced to a 2-pack on the contributing shed, and the 3-pack in the window well has been eliminated from the new accessory structure. Condition number 12 was to remove the new roof on the south elevation of the shed, which has been removed. Condition number 13 was to revise the 3-pack of doors on the shed to be of more traditional proportions and simple in design. Again, it's been reduced in width from a 3-pack to a 2-pack. The overall size hasn't been dramatically reduced. Condition number 14 was to remove the trash enclosure from the historic shed and relocate it elsewhere. It previously was proposed in the corner of the historic shed. It's been moved to a corner of the new accessory structure, which is more appropriate. And condition 15 was to ensure that snow guards are placed on all required areas, which has been done. Staff has proposed a few new conditions. One of them is kept from previously, as I mentioned. The new condition number 1 is to revise the door and window configuration at the front entry to maintain the historic arrangement. We have photos of this house that show that the door was closer to the front facing gable and then a window to the right. This configuration has been rearranged, and we feel because it's a supporting structure, as many historic details should be preserved as possible or restored as possible. Condition number 2 was to remove the new window from the west side of the historic structure. There are 2 historic looking windows on the west side currently, and another one's proposed to be added, which again, in a supporting structure is not appropriate. Condition number 3 is to better step down the garage to the alley and to the historic shed. When you saw this proposal in October, the shed was a couple of feet lower and did not have dormers, and staff felt at the time that it related in mass and scale and stepped down to the historic or contributing shed better than it does now with the additional height and the dormers. So the new condition number 4 is to also reduce the size of the dormers on the garage. Condition number 5 is the one that was kept from previously, which is to reduce the size of the new windows on the east elevation under the dormer. These seem the size of the cluster and the amount of glazing in this location seems to be not consistent with the guidelines. Condition number 6 is to remove the skylight from the shed roof. Again, contributing shed, minimal alterations should be proposed. And condition number 7 is to revise the new shed door to be of a more traditional 4-rated shed. Again, the size of these doors has been reduced slightly, but again, they feel quite contemporary in a contributing shed. This south facade is away from the alley and would not likely be too visible from the public, but again, it is a contributing shed and should be treated as such. And that is it for the new conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I've got one question.
Yes.
So John, can you expand a little bit more on your condition number 3 to better step down the garage, the alley? Is it primarily the dormers that are, and the size of the windows that are associated with the dormers that is your concern? Or is if both the dormers went away, would you still be concerned with the massive scale of the garage?
I think both. I'm concerned with the size of the dormers, which appear to be over half of the roof area. The addition of the dormers definitely increased the mass of this alley structure, and it also it eliminates the nice relationship that there previously was with the contributing shed.
Thank you. Okay. We'll hear from the applicant. If you'd like to share your screen, welcome.
Sure. Hi, good evening, Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. And also just for the record to note, Tommy Hine Architects is co-applicant. And Tommy's here this evening as well too. So we're not going to go over all the changes that Johnny did. I had some slides earlier to do that. That would just be redundant. So appreciate the thorough review and the comments. We just have a few areas we'd like to talk about tonight. One is the location of the front door for that one condition. The current front entry door and porch pop-out are non-historic with the door facing east on the eastern facade. This is the current situation. There's a little rectangular pop-out that kind of comes out, and then the actual door is over on the east facade going in this way. And so what's proposed is trying to recreate a more historic front entry coming in, and it doesn't match the historic, image shown in the RGS photo, but it's a much better improvement over what exists today. This is the RGS photo that John has showed, and there's this front door clearly facing Pacific, and then there's not a bay projection at this point in time. Not sure really when that popped in, but the proposal at least is to go back to and create a more very traditional front porch entry coming into the home, relocating it from the eastern facade to the southern facade as proposed. And this zoom in, you can actually see the door, and I'm glad John agrees on that. So this is the picture now. You can see there's this little pop out here. That's being removed somewhat. And then there's the no door here, and it's actually, you can see the door kind of facing east right there. Supporting structures do not have to be restored to original is our understanding. Contributing, we understand, do. So we're proposing to get close back to the historic. And we presume the door was relocated when that little porch bay projection was added. And, we think it really meets RC 34 a lot better than the current door, which is, having the character defining feature, having it face the street, and then similar in location, size, and type. So to seeing those traditionally. And so we're certainly proposing something that meets us, we believe, a supporting structure status, and would just ask that this design be approved. And then also functionally, just the location of the door is important to the owner because it provides a better flow through in the design of the home. I know it's not a HARC consideration, but it is important to the property owner, Pascal. The eastern dormer window reductions, Shauna went over that. The windows were reduced, and we feel it meets the standard for this. Understand there's some level of review there, but you can see the outline of the old windows here and a little bit of a zoom in, and then the newer, thicker Mountains that came in as well too. So, Tommy, do you have anything to add?
Well, I wanted to talk about, do you have the west window as well? For the elevation?
I can pull it up in a minute. So hang on, sorry.
The only thing I wanted to add on the west window to the board was that we thought it was okay to add another window on the west side because there's actually a neighbor house directly adjacent to that and a little further forward. And we wanted to get the additional light into that living space because we made the bay window, we made the bay smaller. So we didn't think there was too much impact from a historical perspective by adding, a window on not on the primary facade, but on a secondary facade that's about 3 feet from the property line and has another adjacent structure on the west. And so we would like to add that window. I forget what what condition was, I don't know the exact condition. It was
Number
about the
2.
west window, Jonna.
Number
Yeah,
2.
we thought we understand. Again, there seems to be a little bit of contributing structure. More of a leaning towards a contributing structure treatment versus a supporting structure treatment. And so I just wanted to add that if we could add that window, overall, we've really made some significant strides and compromises here, getting rid of all the dormers, making all the windows smaller, getting rid of all the doors. I think it's come a long way. So, I think these few small asks to me on a supporting structure seem reasonable and acceptable.
How many feet back from the street is it, as the guideline references visibility from Colorado?
Yeah, so we're back. If you can go to the site plan, Chris, I think we're back 17. It's probably about 18 or 19 feet back from the street on the side yard.
Okay, thanks.
And you could see how it's concealed by 457. We're recessed a little bit from 457. It's really just to get a little bit more natural light, in that living space in the front because we're so far back. We did respect that front yard that's there now.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Jonna has her.
Oh, Jonna, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it sounds like maybe I need to clarify the applicability of the guidelines and standards. So contributing and supporting structures are subject to the rehabilitation standards, not just contributing structures. So this one is subject to the rehabilitation standards, which are noted in the proposed conditions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I have a question from the last go round. They lowered the ridge height of the addition. But how many feet below the main house is that now? Sorry. I noted that.
3 feet,
3 feet lower than the main house?
looks like it,
Okay, on that.
on
1.3.
1.3.
All right, 3 feet. Bob. Okay. Anybody else have questions?
I'd like for, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Chris and Tommy, can you kind of elaborate a little bit on Jonna's condition for the mass and scale and the dormers of the garage? Are you guys willing to do that, or do you have any pushback?
Yeah, Tommy's muted again. There
Thank
go,
you.
Tommy.
No, I think it could be, I think we were trying to get some more space up there. So I was amenable to Jonna's conditions on the garage shed.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'd really like to talk about condition number 1. When I look at your drawing that shows 1908 or 1908, the door is on the east side of the main.
Chris, can you put that up?
building.
Sure, let me share my
One
screen
second.
again. So Bob, which drawing are you talking about?
Well, drawing on A06 is the
Okay.
1908 perspectives. And it shows that the door is on the east side of the main body of the building, on the east side of the porch. So to the left.
Yep.
And the window facing the street. And if you go to the 1921 photograph,
right? Which I have a better one on my PowerPoint, so I'll flip to it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that that's a door when you look straight in. And the window placement, I think is what Jonna was talking about, doing something more similar to that. But I'm convinced that the door goes to the east side of the main body of the building. Also, it says that the sort of that hip roof over the porch is non-historic. We see it there. We also see it, the drawings that were created for 1908. So I don't understand why that's being made into a shed. And I can understand when I studied the plan to figure out why you had to have the door where it is because you come into the landing at the main, its existing level or whatever it is changed. And then you're dropping down 29 inches into the living room. And I can understand doing that because it gives you more height in the space.
Right.
I'm not convinced that this is the appropriate solution to that as well. And let me just add, you're using the wall, I believe, of the bump out that was added on top of the porch as the line for that front facade. It's not the actual facade of the house. It's that closet or whatever it was that was stuck on the porch is the line that's being used as the new wall with the door and the new window. And the columns are like 6 inches away from that bump out. So you don't have the original porch remaining. The actual dimensions of the original porch are adding more porch in the front of that to make it seem like it makes it okay. So I'm troubled by it, by the way it's being treated, that it's not even close to being what we think is the historic condition configuration.
So the question is, well,
But restoration is not required for supporting structures. Is that correct?
We're not talking about restoration. We're talking about keeping a roof that clearly appears on
Okay.
on
I just wanted to understand where you're coming from, Bob. So thank you. If I could just point out real quick, this is a 1908 map. It doesn't even look like there's a front porch at that point in time on this. And then 1922 clearly shows, some porch for the photo. I mean, it matches pretty close. And it's that age-old dilemma of having a 1908 Sanborn map and no map at the period of significance in 1913. And it was our opinion that that porch was added after 1913, but that's just our opinion. And so it's that conundrum of what do you do? It's almost like the 1922 Sanborn maps become gospel because there's no fact to disprove that something was added between 1913 and 1922. And so we face this issue on a lot of projects, and I'm not sure which way HARC wants to go on this, but one thing we do hopefully agree on is that it's better to have a front door that faces onto the street. That to me, a dark pattern, because that's all siding and it goes dark to the ground. I'm fairly convinced that's a door because otherwise that would be light and color completely up from the ground up. And I know this is all pixelated and super old, and we can't get too precise, but I'm not sure how you can have such a light pattern around a window, then it goes to a dark pattern, which has to be something. So I'm guessing it's a door there.
Maybe. There are other houses in town where you step onto the porch and you go into the side of the building.
Sure.
If the door swung open in the photo.
Or the door swung open on the photo. Yeah, who knows?
Well, I see what you're saying, but I think it's important though that the door faces Pacific, I think.
But should it be on the actual wall of the house, not on that bump out closet?
Well, I see your point, but we've had to make some of those kind of decisions with this project along the way.
you know, I think of this, I would agree that I'll turn this into a question, since we're not deliberating. That if it faces south, with the passerby, which is the second sector interiors, rule of thumb, what is it that the passerby would think or know? But Bob, well, we gotta save that for deliberation. So does it work traffic wise to have the door as originally shown versus at the end of that bump out closet? I guess that's the problem with the stairs inside.
Are
Well,
you talking about on the left side of the window and having the window on the right?
it clearly, the reason we're suggesting the right side is because that's what we'd like. So if we find other guidelines that are contrary to how we're interpreting this, then I'll have to allow the board to discuss that.
Tommy and Chris, have there been any discoveries if you peel back to see what historic framing in this structure?
No, we haven't dug into the framing in the house. The shed absolutely dug into that one, but not the framing of the house. Based on the Sanborn maps that I showed you, again, this was the porch in 1922, this line right here, that we know existed. So, I can only presume that pop out occurred after 1922 because it wasn't shown, but it could, who knows? It's tougher on this one, but that photo I think is fairly good evidence of, at least, let me pull that up one last time.
I think we looked at this project in its totality, that we were really doing a great job in terms of preserving its relationship to Pacific, preserving its relationship to its context, preserving the shed. There's been a lot of different factors to balance on this one. I think it's in a good spot.
What about the roof over the porch?
Yeah.
I think we could change that back, Bob. We didn't, I'm not certain about that, but I think we could adapt that to the historic.
Well, I think when you get in there and start looking at the framing, and you can clearly see that it was added after the material that's making up the actual house that there, then I would say, come back for a change order or change, whatever we call it.
Yeah.
CA.
Amendment. Yeah.
And I'd really like you to look at, well, we'll get into conditions and stuff. I'd really like you to look at putting the window where it is on that 1921 picture.
Yeah. And I know what's going to be important,
Yeah.
at least hopefully we can all agree that, as a best faith effort, that was a door, and that's a lot more central access than doing something to the left there, for circulation and such. So in your deliberations, hopefully, some arrangement of door on the left side, window on the right, or vice versa, and understand you want to keep that top part. I hear you on that. So thank you for the questions, though. It's all good.
The same thing, once you start tearing into there, we'll see evidence of, was there a door there? Where was the window? All that will come out, I think, I hope.
Yeah,
And then
that
you can
porch
evaluate it
is,
at that point.
that porch is pretty well redone. They added those weird kind of Doric columns, Bob, and
Mhm.
it's a tough one you're right, until we dive into it. There was quite a bit of historic material removed on this one, unfortunately.
Possibly, yeah.
I think it was the restaurant remodel that did most of the damages.
Yeah.
And when my first impression when I looked at it, why are the columns like 6 inches away from the front of the house? It
Yeah.
makes no sense to me.
There was a HARC application to remove the columns. They actually had those columns out on the front deck. Like, it was really wild looking. And it framed a little canopy or gazebo for shade for the outdoor dining area. it was wild.
And then but you've got that, I'd call it a closet that was stuck on the porch. That's, you know, on that recessed area. I just like you to take a look at, well, we'll get into the
Yeah.
conditions, but
Okay,
I've
Yeah.
said
Well,
enough.
thank you for the questions. We appreciate it.
yeah. Any other questions?
While we have them, Jonna, do you have anything to add about the whole entry? Any other deeper discussions or thoughts that you have? While we.
I
still
think you
have-
got
have-
to the heart of my concern. I do appreciate Bob's realization of how they've reconfigured the porch with the columns, and it's not appropriate. And I understand that you've been approaching this as not having to comply with the rehabilitation standards, but they do apply. So I think it should resemble as much of the historic form and elements as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
You guys have any comments? Sorry, taking your job.
other questions? Okay, no more questions for the applicant? We've lost all our public. Except for one. Thanks for hanging with us. Oh, wait a minute.
Uh-oh.
Sherry Harvey has her hand up. Welcome back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, do you need or is it possible to actually add a condition that asks for a site report to confirm the historic configuration of the front porch as much as possible? I'm just worried because John is so busy and she doesn't have help. And if you made it a condition, then maybe it would be a bit more specific or accurate. So that was my question to you guys. And then I just wanted to say that we all know that there's no difference in the National Park Service standards when they talk about contributing and supporting, and they don't say you could just go for the lower when you have the information that's in front of you that shows how it was historically. Because not only is the placement of the front door affects the mass of the house, but also the setting. I think that's an important thing to strive for. That was it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Okay. The applicant have any final comments? Go ahead. I see a hand up.
Yeah, Tommy's muted again.
You see.
Oh, I just wanted to say to John and the board, I mean, we're very familiar with all the guidelines, and I was, on all these projects, especially those that are supporting that have had historic elements removed, we really do our best to balance, obviously the guidelines and making these, creating functionality where we can, with these concerns. So I didn't want to, give you the wrong impression, John. I mean, we are following them as closely as possible. And sometimes we have to balance those with other challenges. And this is a challenging site for sure. So.
Yeah, and definitely the RE standards apply. We've known that. It's just the level of, there's a comment someplace in the guidelines that I have in front of me. It just says restoration is not required, for supporting. And I think that was something that kind of resonated. But I understand in a redesign, it's ideal to get as close as possible back to historic, and it is a balance, like Tommy said. So thank you for your time.
If I may, I think that means that you don't have to change what's there. You can absolutely keep what's there, but you don't want to keep what's there. So if you change it, it should be changed back to a more historic appearance.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. I do appreciate it.
Okay. Well, John has 1 through 7. To me, I would suggest leaving in there that let forensics tell us what to do. If the proof is there where the door was and the window, just can we put something in there to let them do it and give the report to John?
Yeah, I wouldn't change 1 through 7 at all.
Okay. So everybody good with 1 through 7 with adding something about the forensic study will determine the location of the door and the windows?
I would actually, are we in deliberation now? Or are we?
Yes. Yeah.
I would actually change number 1 to give it a little bit more teeth here. I would say revise the door and window configuration at the front entry along with the location of the northern porch wall, the form of the porch roof to maintain the historic arrangement per that condition. And if we wanted to add any forensic considerations, then we do it there. Or we could do it as a separate.
Well, we could say based on pending forensic study, couldn't we?
Sure.
Just add those 4 words at the end. Is everybody okay with that?
I think that makes sense.
All right.
I hope it's got enough teeth.
Cause I'm tired of guessing after these Sanborn maps when there's this big gap. So let's get to the truth and see where it is and let them report back. So let's just weave that in there pending forensic study. I was almost gonna add on 4, maybe to significantly reduce the size of the dormers, but we can let Jonna just see it when it comes back, I guess. I don't care. I mean, they were overpowering on the garage, but I don't, but no new ones?
I have no new ones.
I think we modified number 1.
All right. This is the easiest motion of them. So who wants to go with the easy one?
I mean, I'd do it, but I didn't catch all your wording for the number 1.
Go ahead if you like.
Okay.
You got it.
Hold on, give me a second. Okay, I move to approve the proposed small scale addition, small scale repositioning, minor scale repositioning, minor scale alterations, and minor scale new construction at 453 West Pacific, Block 5, Lot 14, and the west half of Lot 13, West Telluride Addition, based on the findings in the staff memo dated December 13th, 2023, and with the following conditions. Number 1, revised to state revise the door and window configurations at the front entry, along with the location of the northern porch wall and the form of the porch roof per the pending forensic study to maintain the historic arrangements per RE 10, A, and B. Number 2 through 7 as stated. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on December 13th, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code. Revised plans incorporating the conditions of approval shall be submitted within 60 days of this approval, or this approval becomes null and void unless otherwise indicated. The revised drawings submitted for a certificate of appropriateness must be a complete set with any changes to the drawings, cloud and labeled. Any changes to the drawings beyond the conditions of approval may result in more than one submittal being required.
Kieran will second.
I have a question. On number 1, as we revised it, did you say door and window? I heard door and then a porch. But did we
I
mean-
meant to say door and window if I did not.
I think you did.
I might have missed it.
I am gonna have to listen to the recording
Do you want me to restate number 1?
if you'd like to.
Okay, I'll restate number 1. Revise the door and window configuration at the front entry along with the location of the northern porch wall and the form of the porch roof per pending forensic study to maintain the historic arrangement per RE 10, A, and B.
Okay,
Voting. Kieran, yes.
Matt, yes?
Mark, yes?
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
All right, one more
Oh, we gotta do that.
demolition. I can do that one.
We need the motion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I move to approve the demolition of the non-designated secondary structure inside the THLD located at 453 West Pacific, Block 5, Lot 14, and the west half of Lot 13, West Telluride Addition, with the following finding. Number 1 as stated, and with the following conditions, numbers 1 and 2 as stated. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on December 13th, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
I'll second.
Kieran, yes.
Matt, yes?
Mark, yes?
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonna, and everyone. Have a nice holiday season.
Thank you.
Two.
Thank you.
So Jonna, we're going to pass on the red lines and take that up next time and adjourn, correct?
Correct, thank you.
Tommy and Chris, I really appreciate the way your packages have evolved with all of the three-dimensional information, and they're gone now.
They're
but
not
it's-
even here anymore, but you can tell them next
We'll
time.
let them know. Yes.
Tell them over a beer.
All right, so. It's been about past 9 for a long time, so at 8:55, we will adjourn the meeting. And if it works out and everybody's able to, and John is feeling better, maybe Monday night, we'll get an email out. Could have a little Christmas cheer for a half hour. At the Sheridan Bar or something like we personally. So that's it. We're off.